The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt in a cloud of dust, and Evelyn Carter stepped down into what should have been her new life, but found only death. Silver Creek, Wyoming stretched before her like a graveyard of broken dreams, its empty windows staring back like hollow eyes. The man who'd promised to marry her had been dead for 3 months, and she'd traveled 2,000 miles to become a bride to a ghost. Welcome to a story of deception, survival, and the unexpected love that blooms in the ashes of abandonment. Stick with me to the end and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled. The leather-bound letters in Evelyn Carter's lap had grown soft from constant handling during the 3-week journey from Boston to Wyoming territory. Each envelope bore the same confident script, the same promises of prosperity and companionship that had drawn her away from the suffocating cotton mills and into this rattling stagecoach that smelled of tobacco spit and broken dreams. She pressed her palm against the window glass, watching the landscape transform from green valleys to endless brown plains that seemed to swallow hope itself. "Silver Creek, next stop!" The driver bellowed from above, his voice cutting through the wheel clatter and hoarse snorts that had become the rhythm of her days. Evelyn's heart quickened. She smoothed her best traveling dress, navy wool with pearl buttons she'd sewn on herself, and checked her reflection in the small hand mirror she'd packed. 23 years old, with auburn hair that refused to stay pinned despite her best efforts, and green eyes that her mother had always said held too much defiance for a proper lady. Well, Mother wasn't here now, was she? Mother was back in Boston, probably still crying into her handkerchief about her daughter running off to marry a stranger. "You sure about this, miss?" The passenger across from her, a grizzled prospector named Hutchins, had been eyeing her with concern for the past 50 miles. "Silver Creek ain't exactly, well, it ain't Boston." "Mr. Henderson's letters have been quite clear about the town's prospects," Evelyn replied, lifting her chin. "The silver mines are producing well, there's a school being built, and well, Henderson." Hutchins' weathered face went pale beneath the dirt. "Marcus Henderson?" "Yes, my intended. Do you know him?" The old man opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head as he turned to stare out his own window. "No, miss." Must be thinking of someone else. But Evelyn had caught the look, pity mixed with something darker. Fear, perhaps? She pushed the thought away. 3 months of correspondence couldn't be built on lies. Marcus Henderson was real. His promises were real. And in just minutes, she would step into the new life she'd risked everything to claim. The stagecoach lurched to a stop so suddenly that Evelyn nearly tumbled from her seat. Through the window, she expected to see a bustling main street, perhaps with wooden sidewalks and shop windows displaying their wares. Instead, she saw nothing. Or rather, the skeletal remains of what had once been something. "Silver Creek," the driver called again, though his voice had lost its earlier enthusiasm. Evelyn gathered her carpet bag and stepped down from the coach, her boots hitting packed earth that puffed dust around her skirts. The other passengers, Hutchins and a traveling salesman, remained in their seats, apparently continuing on to the next town. "The next real town," a voice whispered in her mind. "Wait!" she called to the driver as he prepared to leave. "This can't be right." "Where's the depot? Where's anyone?" The driver, a man whose face resembled old leather left too long in the sun, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "This is Silver Creek, miss, or what's left of it. You sure someone's meeting you?" Evelyn looked around desperately. The main street stretched before her, lined with buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. The bank's windows were boarded up, its painted sign hanging by a single nail. The mercantile's door stood open, creaking in the wind like a broken jaw. Tumbleweeds rolled past with more life than she could see in any doorway or window. "Marcus Henderson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's supposed to. He said he would." "Henderson's dead, miss." The words came from behind her, spoken by a woman's voice worn rough as sandpaper. Evelyn spun around to find a figure dressed in black from head to toe, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. The woman's face might have been handsome once, before sun and sorrow carved deep lines around her mouth and eyes. "I'm Ida Henderson," the woman continued. "Marcus was my nephew. Died of fever, 3 months back. 3 months. The same time the letters had started arriving in Boston. Evelyn felt her knees buckle, but she forced herself to remain standing. The stagecoach was already pulling away, its wheels kicking up a dust cloud that made her eyes water. Or perhaps that was something else making her eyes water. "But the letters," Evelyn said, pulling them from her bag with shaking hands. "He wrote every week. He said—" Ida Henderson stepped closer, took one of the letters, and studied it with eyes that had seen too much. "That's Marcus's hand, sure enough. But these are old, miss, copied from letters he wrote to another girl, maybe 2 years ago. She never came." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "You're not the first. Won't be the last, I expect." "I don't understand." "Someone's been using Marcus's old letters to lure women out here. We've had 5 this year alone. Most catch the next stage out if they have money for it." Ida's gaze dropped to Evelyn's worn carpet bag, taking in the careful mending on her dress, the boots that had been resoled at least twice. "Do you have money for it?" Evelyn's hand went to the small purse in her pocket. 17 cents. She'd spent everything on the journey here, believing she'd have no need for money once she was married. "No." Ida nodded as if she'd expected that answer. "Come on then. Can't leave you standing in the street like lost livestock." As Evelyn followed the older woman down the desolate main street, she noticed things that Marcus's letters, whoever had really written them, had failed to mention. The silence, broken only by the wind whistling through broken windows. The way paint peeled from every surface like diseased skin. The cemetery on the hill that seemed to have more residents than the town itself. "How many people still live here?" Evelyn asked. "Maybe 30 souls if you count the Mexicans at the old mine camp. Used to be near 300 before the silver played out." "The silver played out?" But the letters said, "The letters lied, girl. About everything except one thing. This town is dying, and it needs help. Just not the kind of help a mail-order bride can give." They stopped in front of a house that might have been white once, but had faded to the color of old bones. The picket fence leaned drunkenly, and the garden was nothing but dried stalks and dust. Ida pushed open the front door, which squealed like something in pain. "You can stay here tonight," Ida said. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do with you." The interior of the house was sparse but clean, smelling of lye soap and loneliness. Faded daguerreotypes lined the mantel, all showing the same young man at various ages, tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident smile that Evelyn recognized from the photograph that had accompanied the first letter. "That's Marcus," Ida confirmed, following her gaze. "Handsome devil, wasn't he? Too handsome for his own good. Always thought he could charm his way out of any trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Ida's laugh was bitter as winter wind, the kind that comes from promising things you can't deliver. "He wrote to a dozen girls over the years, always swearing marriage, always finding reasons to delay when they actually showed up. Said he was waiting for the perfect one." She shook her head. "Fever took him before he could disappoint anyone else." Evelyn set down her carpetbag and moved to the window, looking out at the dying town. "Who's been sending the letters? Who's doing this to women like me?" "Don't know. Sheriff, when we had one, thought it might be someone trying to bring life back to the town. Figured maybe if enough desperate women showed up, some might stay, might marry the men still hanging on here." Ida joined her at the window. "Fool notion if you ask me. Can't build a town on lies." "The men who are left," Evelyn said slowly, "what do they do? How do they survive?" "Scraping, mostly. There's Tom Garrett, runs what's left of the general store, though he's got more debts than goods. The Hendricks brothers have a ranch about 5 miles out, though they're barely hanging on. Few others trying to work claims that went dry years ago." Ida paused, then added, "And there's Jonas Mercer." "Who's Jonas Mercer?" "The blacksmith. Lives at the edge of town, keeps to himself. Still working, though Lord knows why. Not much call for horseshoes in a town with no horses." Ida turned away from the window. "He's the only one who seems to be doing all right, but he's different. Lost his wife and daughter to cholera 5 years back. Hasn't been the same since." Evelyn watched a dust devil spin down the empty street, carrying bits of paper and dried leaves like memories being scattered. "I need work," she said. I can't go back to Boston, and I can't afford to go anywhere else. Is there anything? Anything at all? Can you cook? Yes. Sew? Yes. Keep books? Evelyn turned from the window, something sparking in her chest that might have been hope. Yes. I kept the accounts at the mill where I worked. I'm good with numbers. Ida studied her for a long moment. Tom Garrett can barely read, let alone keep proper accounts. His store's a mess of IOUs and forgotten debts. Maybe, but no, he couldn't pay you. He can barely keep himself fed. Room and board, Evelyn said quickly. That would be enough to start, just until I can save enough to leave. Leave, Ida repeated, and for the first time something like a smile crossed her weathered face. That's what they all say. But let me tell you something about dying towns, miss. They don't let go easy. They hold on with ghost fingers and whispered promises, making you think that maybe, just maybe, you could be the one to bring them back to life. That night, Evelyn lay in the narrow bed in Ida's spare room, listening to the wind howl through the empty streets like a chorus of abandoned souls. The mattress was lumpy, stuffed with what felt like corn husks, and the blanket smelled of mothballs and resignation. Through the thin walls, she could hear Ida moving around, the floorboards creaking under her feet in a rhythm that suggested routine rather than restlessness. She pulled out Marcus Henderson's letters, or whoever had written them, and read them by the light of a single candle. The promises seemed to mock her now. Our town is thriving with the boom of industry. You'll love the she-able ladies of our church social committee. The house I'm preparing for us has a lovely garden where you can grow roses. Lies, all lies. But written with such conviction, such detail, that she'd built a complete life in her imagination. She'd seen herself in that garden, smelled those roses, felt Marcus's imagined arms around her as they watched the sunset over the mountains that she now knew were bare and hostile rather than majestic. A sound from outside made her sit up. Not the wind this time, but something rhythmic. Metal on metal. She rose and went to the window, peering out into the darkness. In the distance, at the very edge of town, she could see a faint orange glow. The blacksmith's forge, she realized. Jonas Mercer was working, even at this hour. The sound was oddly comforting. In a town full of endings, here was someone still creating, still building, still refusing to surrender. She watched that distant glow until her eyes grew heavy, and when she finally slept, she dreamed not of roses and lies, but of iron and fire and the possibility of forging something new from the ashes of deception. Morning came harsh and bright, the sun streaming through the cracked window glass like an accusation. Evelyn dressed in her second-best dress, brown wool, serviceable rather than pretty, and pinned her hair back severely. If she was going to convince anyone to hire her, she needed to look capable, not marriageable. Ida was already in the kitchen, frying something that might have been bacon but looked more like leather strips. "Coffee's on the stove," she said without turning around. "It's terrible, but it's hot." Evelyn poured herself a cup and immediately understood what Ida meant. The coffee tasted like it had been made from burnt acorns and disappointment, but it was indeed hot, and after the cold night, she was grateful for that much. "I'm going to speak with Mr. Garrett about the bookkeeping position," Evelyn announced. Ida turned from the stove, spatula in hand. "He didn't offer you any position." "Not yet. Girl, Tom Garrett hasn't had 2 coins to rub together in 3 years. He keeps that store open out of pure stubbornness, and the fact that he lives in the back room. You'd be working for free." "Room and board," Evelyn corrected, "and the experience of bringing a failing business back to life. That has to be worth something, somewhere." Ida studied her for a long moment, then shrugged and returned to her cooking. "The store's 2 blocks down, on the left. The one with the door hanging off its hinges. Try not to let the smell knock you over when you walk in." The walk to Garrett's general store gave Evelyn her first real look at Silver Creek in daylight, and it was somehow worse than the darkness had suggested. Every building showed signs of abandonment. Broken windows patched with boards, roofs missing shingles, porches that sagged like tired old men. A few faces peered at her from behind curtains, quickly disappearing when she met their gaze. The store, when she found it, was indeed identifiable by its broken door, which hung at an angle that suggested it had given up any pretense of actually closing. The smell that wafted out was a combination of rotting vegetables, mouse droppings, and human despair. Evelyn took a deep breath of clean air, then stepped inside. The chaos that greeted her was almost impressive in its completeness. Shelves leaned against each other like drunks trying to stay upright. Merchandise, what little there was, sat in seemingly random piles. A barrel of what might once have been pickles now hosted a thriving colony of mold. And behind a counter covered in papers, empty bottles, and what appeared to be the remains of several meals, sat Tom Garrett. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 35, with the kind of face that had probably been pleasant before defeat took up residence in every line. His clothes were rumpled, his beard untrimmed, and he was staring at a ledger as if it were written in a foreign language. "Mr. Garrett?" He looked up, blinking in surprise. "We're closed." "Your door is open." "Door's been open for 3 years. Doesn't mean we're not closed." He returned to his ledger, then looked up again, seeming to actually see her for the first time. "You're the new one." "The bride." "I'm Evelyn Carter, and I'm not anyone's bride." "I'm a bookkeeper." That got his attention. He set down his pencil, which Evelyn noticed he'd been holding upside down, and really looked at her. "A bookkeeper?" "Yes, and from the look of things, you need one." Tom Garrett laughed, but it was the laugh of a man who'd forgotten what genuine humor felt like. "Miss, I need a miracle. I need customers who can pay in something other than IOUS. I need suppliers who haven't written me off as a lost cause. You need someone to organize your accounts, inventory your remaining stock, and create a system for managing credit that might actually result in payment," Evelyn interrupted. "You need someone to write letters to your suppliers, explaining a new payment plan. You need someone to clean this place up so customers don't run away from the smell before they can buy anything." Tom stared at her. "You offering?" "I'm offering to work for room and board. You let me sleep in your storeroom and feed me 2 meals a day, and I'll turn this disaster into something resembling a business. The storeroom's full of rats. Then I'll start by dealing with the rats." "I can't pay you." "I said room and board." "Why?" Tom leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously. "Why would you do that?" Evelyn looked around the chaos of the store, then back at him. "Because I came here with 17 cents and a carpet bag full of dreams that turned out to be lies. Because the next stagecoach out costs $5 that I don't have. Because—" She paused, surprised by the truth of what she was about to say. "Because I've never walked away from something just because it was broken. Back in Boston, at the mill, they gave me the worst accounts, the ones everyone else had given up on. And I fixed them. Every single one. This ain't a textile mill account, miss. This is a dying town's last gasp." "Then we'd better make it count, hadn't we?" Tom was quiet for a long moment, then stood up, sending several papers fluttering to the floor. "The storeroom's through that door. There's a cot in there somewhere, under the flour sacks. Or what used to be flour before the roof started leaking. Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. It won't be much, probably beans and whatever meat I can trade for." "What about the rats?" "There's a cat somewhere, mostly feral. Good luck." Evelyn spent the rest of the morning excavating the storeroom, which was less a room and more a monument to poor planning. The flour had indeed gone bad, creating a paste that had hardened into something resembling cement. The rats had built an entire civilization in one corner, complete with what appeared to be a main thoroughfare made of shredded newspapers. She found the cat, a rangy orange Tom with one ear missing, sleeping on the one dry shelf. He opened one eye when she approached, assessed her as non-threatening, and went back to sleep. "Some help you are," she muttered, then set about creating order from chaos. By noon, she'd cleared enough space to find the cot, which was in better condition than she'd expected. She'd also discovered 3 bolts of decent fabric, a case of preserved peaches that were somehow still good, and a box of ammunition for guns the store no longer sold. Making progress? She turned to find Tom in the doorway, holding a plate with what appeared to be beans and some kind of meat. "Your inventory system is non-existent," she said, accepting the plate gratefully. You have merchandise here you don't even know about. Anything valuable? The fabric could sell. The peaches definitely. The ammunition. She paused. Who around here still has guns? Everyone. It's the one thing nobody pawned. You can lose your horse, your house, even your boots, but out here you keep your gun. Then the ammunition is valuable. How much do you owe your suppliers? Tom's face darkened. More than I can pay. How much exactly? I don't know. Evelyn set down her plate, half the beans uneaten. You don't know how much you owe? The ledgers it's all mixed up. Some of it goes back 3 years. There's IOUs from customers mixed in with bills from suppliers, and half of it's water damaged from when the roof leaked, and show me. For the next 4 hours, Evelyn sat at Tom's disaster of a desk, sorting through papers that told the story of a business's slow death. Bills marked final notice from 2 years ago. IOUs from customers who'd long since left town, orders for merchandise that had never arrived, payments for goods that had never been sent. This is salvageable, she said finally. Tom, who'd been restocking what few shelves had actual products, nearly dropped a jar of preserves. What? Your debts are substantial but not insurmountable. Most of your creditors have written you off. They're not expecting payment. If you could offer them even partial payment, they might be willing to negotiate. With what money? With the money we'll get from actually collecting on these IOUs. Those people are broke or gone. Not all of them. Evelyn held up a piece of paper. Jonas Mercer owes you $40. Jonas pays cash. Not according to this, signed and dated 6 months ago. Tom came over and looked at the paper. I forgot about that. He ordered special iron stocks, said he'd pay when his commission came through. What commission? He was making gates for some ranch over in Cheyenne. Big job. Tom scratched his head. Come to think of it, he's been buying regular supplies since then. Must have gotten paid. Then he can pay this. Nobody asked Jonas for money. Why not? Tom was quiet for a moment. He lost his family. Man's been through enough. And you're about to lose your business. Haven't you been through enough, too? Before Tom could answer, the broken door scraped open, and a man entered who could only be Jonas Mercer. Evelyn knew it even before Tom stiffened beside her, knew it from the way he filled the doorframe, from the coal dust ingrained in his skin, from the way he moved like someone who'd learned to take up less space in the world despite his size. He was tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of years working iron. His dark hair was too long, tied back with a leather cord, and his face was hidden behind a beard that hadn't seen a barber in months. But it was his eyes that stopped her, gray as storm clouds and just as turbulent, holding the kind of pain that time hadn't softened. Tom, he said, his voice low and rough from disuse. Need more flux. Sure, Jonas. Let me... Mr. Mercer, Evelyn interrupted, standing and smoothing her skirts. I'm Evelyn Carter, the new bookkeeper. According to our records, you have an outstanding debt of $40 from 6 months ago. The store went silent. Even the cat, who'd wandered in to investigate, seemed to hold its breath. Jonas Mercer's gray eyes turned to her, and she felt the full weight of his attention like a physical thing. You're the bride, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm the bookkeeper, she corrected, and you owe this establishment $40. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her ink-stained fingers, her practical dress, the ledger she held like a shield. Tom didn't mention he'd hired anyone. That's because I hired myself. The debt, Mr. Mercer? The commission fell through. Then you'll need to arrange a payment plan. Miss Carter, Tom started, but she held up a hand. Mr. Garrett is barely keeping the store open. Every debt matters. If you can't pay all at once, we can arrange terms. $2 a week, perhaps. Jonas was quiet for so long that Evelyn wondered if he'd simply decided to ignore her. Then, unexpectedly, his mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. You always this direct with strangers? I'm direct with everyone. It saves time. And if I don't pay? Then you don't get credit anymore. Cash only. Tom's never required cash from me. Tom's never had a bookkeeper before. They stared at each other across the cluttered store, and Evelyn had the strangest feeling that this was some kind of test. She kept her chin up, her gaze steady, even as something about those storm-gray eyes made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with unpaid debts. Finally, Jonas reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather pouch. He counted out 10 silver dollars and placed them on the counter. "That's what I have on me. I'll bring the rest tomorrow." "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." "Tom, please get Mr. Mercer his flux." As Tom scurried to fill the order, Jonas continued to study her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone crying at the stage depot, waiting for the next coach out." "Sorry to disappoint you." "I didn't say I was disappointed." He accepted the flux from Tom, nodded to them both, and left, the door scraping closed, as much as it could, behind him. Tom let out a breath he'd apparently been holding. "I can't believe you just did that." "Did what?" "Collected a debt?" "Nobody talks to Jonas like that. Nobody." "Well, someone should." "He's not a ghost, Tom. He's a customer, and customers pay their bills." She returned to the ledger, making a note of the payment. "Now, let's talk about these suppliers. I think if we write letters explaining a new payment structure," but even as she discussed business strategies with Tom, part of her mind remained on Jonas Mercer, on the way he'd looked at her, not with pity like everyone else, not with dismissal, but with something that might have been recognition, as if he'd seen something in her that matched something in himself. That evening, as she lay on her salvaged cot in the storeroom, which now smelled of soap and vinegar rather than rot and rodents, she could hear the distant ring of hammer on anvil. Jonas was working late again, the sound carrying across the quiet town like a heartbeat, like a reminder that not everything here was dead or dying. Some things were still being forged. The next morning arrived with an unexpected visitor. Evelyn had barely finished her breakfast of stale bread and coffee when the store's broken door scraped open to reveal a man who looked like Prosperity had personally offended him. His clothes were too fine for Silver Creek, a city suit that had seen better decades, a silk vest stretched over a considerable paunch, and boots that had been polished until they gleamed with desperate respectability. "Where's Garrett?" the man demanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from having money when everyone else had dust. "Mr. Garrett is in the back checking inventory," Evelyn replied, setting down her ledger. "May I help you?" The man's eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, the practical dress, the ink-stained fingers, the way she sat behind the counter as if she belonged there. "And you are?" "Evelyn Carter, the bookkeeper." "And you are?" "Silas Prescott." He said it like she should genuflect. When she didn't, his scowl deepened. "I own the bank." "What's left of it, anyway?" "The bank that was boarded up," Evelyn remembered. She kept her expression neutral. "What can we do for you, Mr. Prescott?" "You can get Garrett out here. He's 3 months behind on his loan payments." "Actually, he's 4 months behind," Evelyn said, pulling out the relevant ledger. "Though I notice you haven't sent any collection notices in the past 2 months. Prescott's face reddened. "I don't need to send notices. Everyone knows what they owe me." "Do they?" "Because according to these records, the terms of Mr. Garrett's loan were never properly documented. There's no interest rate specified, no payment schedule, just a lump sum that seems to grow arbitrarily each month." "Now see here, young woman." "Miss Carter," she corrected, "and I'm simply pointing out that any legitimate attempt to collect on this debt would require proper documentation, which you don't seem to have." Tom chose that moment to emerge from the back room, his face going pale when he saw Prescott. "Silas, I wasn't expecting—" "Your girl here seems to think she knows something about banking," Prescott interrupted, his voice dripping contempt. "Maybe you should explain to her how things work in Silver Creek." "How they used to work," Evelyn said, standing. "But things change, Mr. Prescott. For instance, I've been reviewing the town records at the courthouse, what's left of them. Interesting reading, particularly the parts about usury laws in Wyoming territory. The word usury hung in the air like a loaded gun." Prescott's face went from red to purple. "You're threatening me?" "I'm educating you. The legal maximum interest rate in Wyoming territory is 10% per annum. According to my calculations, you've been charging Mr. Garrett nearly 30%. That's not just usury, Mr. Prescott. That's criminal. You can't prove anything. The original papers were lost in the fire of '87. The fire that started in your bank? Evelyn asked innocently. How convenient. But oral contracts are still binding, and I'm sure we could find witnesses to testify about your lending practices. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to renegotiate the terms to something more legal? Prescott looked between her and Tom, his jaw working like he was chewing nails. You brought her here to threaten me? I brought myself here, Evelyn said, and I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply suggesting that proper business practices benefit everyone. Mr. Garrett wants to pay his debts. You want to collect. Surely we can find terms that don't violate federal law. This isn't over, Prescott snarled, but he was already backing toward the door. You think you're clever, girl, but clever doesn't last long out here. This town eats clever for breakfast. After he left, Tom sank onto a crate, his face the color of old paper. You just made an enemy of the most powerful man in Silver Creek. The most powerful man in a dying town isn't that powerful, Evelyn replied, though her hands were shaking as she returned to her ledger. Besides, he's a bully. Bullies fold when someone stands up to them. Or they come back with friends. Tom rubbed his face. Prescott's got connections. His brother runs a cattle outfit about 20 miles north. They've been known to solve problems for him. Then we'd better solve our own problems first. Evelyn pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I'm going to write to the territorial authorities about establishing a proper bank audit. Just having that letter on file should make him think twice. You really did work in a mill office, didn't you? For 3 years, you learned things, watching how the owners squeeze every penny from the workers while crying poverty to the suppliers. Same game, different players. She paused in her writing. That commission Jonas mentioned, the one that fell through. Was Prescott involved? Tom's silence was answer enough. I thought so. A man like that doesn't want anyone else succeeding, makes his own position weaker. She finished the letter with a flourish. I'll need to go to the courthouse to file this. Is it open? Tuesdays and Thursdays when Judge Morrison sobers up enough to unlock the door. Today was Tuesday. Evelyn stood, smoothing her skirts. Then I better go now, while he's still functional. The courthouse was a grand name for what amounted to a 2-room building with pretensions. The paint had peeled away in strips, giving it a diseased appearance, and one of the windows was just a hole covered with oiled paper. Inside, she found Judge Morrison, a man who looked like he'd been pickled in whiskey and regret, slumped over his desk. Judge Morrison? He lifted his head, blinking owlishly. Court's not in session. I need to file a document. File it yourself. Cabinet's over there. He gestured vaguely toward a corner where a filing cabinet stood with half its drawers missing. Evelyn filed her letter, making sure to stamp it with the official seal she found abandoned on the desk. As she turned to leave, she noticed another cabinet, this one locked. The label read Property Deeds. Judge Morrison, who has the key to this cabinet? Prescott. He's the executor for most of the abandoned properties. Of course he was. Isn't that a conflict of interest? The judge laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. Everything in this town is a conflict of interest, miss. We're all conflicted about why we're still interested in staying. Walking back to the store, Evelyn noticed more of the town's residents than she'd seen before. They watched her from windows and doorways, these ghosts of Silver Creek's better days. An old woman sweeping a porch that didn't need sweeping. A man repairing a fence around nothing. Children. She was surprised to see children, playing in the dust with sticks and imagination. She was so focused on observing the town that she almost walked into Jonas Mercer. He was standing outside the store, holding a leather pouch that presumably contained the rest of his debt. But he wasn't looking at the store. He was looking at her, with that same intense gaze that made her feel like he could see through her carefully constructed composure. Miss Carter. Mr. Mercer. Come to settle your account? Among other things. He fell into step beside her, his long stride forcing her to hurry to keep up. Heard you had a visit from Prescott. News travels fast in a small town. Faster in a dying one. Nothing else to do but gossip and wait for the end. That's a cheerful perspective. It's an honest one. He held the door for her, an unexpected courtesy, and followed her inside. Tom was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in the back after the morning's confrontation. Jonas placed the pouch on the counter. $30 were square. Evelyn counted the money, made a note in the ledger, and wrote out a receipt. Thank you for your prompt payment. You're going to get yourself hurt. The sudden change in topic made her look up. I beg your pardon? Prescott. He's not just some small-town crook. He's got real connections, real power, and he doesn't like being challenged, especially not by a woman. Are you warning me off? I'm telling you what is. And I'm telling you that bullies only have the power we give them. She met his gaze steadily. I've dealt with worse than Silas Prescott. Have you now? There was something in his voice, not mockery, but genuine curiosity. In a Boston textile mill. You'd be surprised what goes on in those mills. The owner's sons thinking they have rights to the female workers. Foremen stealing wages and blaming it on accounting errors. Suppliers shorting shipments and threatening violence when called on it. She closed the ledger with a snap. At least here, the threats are out in the open. Jonas studied her for a long moment, and she had the feeling he was reassessing his initial judgment of her. You planning on staying then? I'm planning on surviving. Staying is a luxury I can't afford yet. Yet? She hadn't meant to add that word, but now that it was out there, she couldn't take it back. I need to earn enough for the stage fare. That means making this store profitable enough that Tom can pay me something. That means dealing with Prescott and anyone else who's bleeding this town dry. Mighty ambitious for someone who arrived 3 days ago. 2 days. And ambition is all I have left, Mr. Mercer. That and 17 cents. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes that transformed his face entirely. For a moment, she could see the man he'd been before loss carved those lines around his mouth. Jonas, he said. Call me Jonas. If you're going to be fighting the powers that be in Silver Creek, we might as well be on first-name terms. Evelyn, she offered in return. Well, Evelyn, if you're serious about taking on Prescott, you'll need more than ambition. You'll need allies. Are you volunteering? I'm offering advice. There are others in town who've suffered under Prescott's thumb. The Hendricks brothers lost half their ranch to him on a questionable debt. Mrs. Chen, she runs the laundry, had her life savings in his bank when it conveniently burned. Even Ida Henderson has grievances. But no one's done anything about it. What's to do? He owns the law, such as it is. Judge Morrison owes him money. The sheriff left town 6 months ago rather than enforce another one of Prescott's foreclosures. Jonas moved toward the door, then paused. But someone with knowledge of territorial law, someone who could document the crimes properly, that might be different. After he left, Evelyn stood in the empty store, her mind racing. She'd come here expecting to be a bride, then resigned herself to being a shopkeeper's assistant. But what if she could be something more? What if she could be the catalyst this town needed? Tom emerged from the back room, looking sheepish. Sorry about hiding. Prescott makes me nervous. He makes everyone nervous. That's his power. Evelyn pulled out fresh paper. Tom, I need you to tell me everything. Every debt Prescott holds, every foreclosure he's orchestrated, every suspicious fire or convenient death. Everything. Why? Because someone needs to document it all. Someone needs to build a case that even territorial authorities can't ignore. That's dangerous talk. It's necessary talk. She looked up at him. Tom, this town is dying. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it, but it's not dying of natural causes. It's being murdered, and Prescott is holding the knife. Tom was quiet for a moment, then pulled up a crate to sit on. It started about 5 years ago. Right around the time Jonas's family died, actually. The cholera outbreak. Prescott was the only one with money to help with burials, medical supplies. He started lending at reasonable rates, then... For the next 2 hours, Tom talked while Evelyn wrote. The pattern that emerged was clear. Predatory lending, strategic foreclosures, suspicious fires that destroyed evidence of his crimes. Prescott wasn't just profiting from the town's decline. He was orchestrating it. He wants the whole town, Evelyn said finally, looking at her notes. Every building, every plot of land. But why? There's no silver left. The land's not particularly fertile. What's the value in owning a ghost town? There have been rumors, Tom said slowly, about the railroad, about a possible route through here to connect with the northern lines. And if that happened, anyone who owned the land would become very wealthy. Very wealthy indeed. Evelyn stood, pacing the small space behind the counter. We need proof. Real proof. Documents, witnesses, something that would stand up to legal scrutiny. Most of the documents burned with the bank. Most isn't all. And fires rarely destroy everything. There might be fragments, partial records. She stopped pacing. Tom, who else in town can read and write well? Mrs. Chen, she was educated in San Francisco before she ended up here. The school teacher, Miss Sarah Winters, though she's talking about leaving, and he hesitated. And Jonas, he's educated, more than he lets on. I've seen engineering books at his forge, technical manuals that would make my head spin. That was unexpected. A blacksmith who read engineering manuals. Evelyn filed that information away for later consideration. I need to talk to them. All of them. If we're going to document Prescott's crimes, we need a network of people watching, recording, remembering. You're talking about organizing the whole town against him. I'm talking about saving the whole town from him. Tom shook his head, but there was something like admiration in his expression. You've been here 2 days, and you're ready to start a revolution. Revolutions have been started by less. She began organizing her notes. Now, let's get back to legitimate business. Those suppliers you owe. I've drafted letters proposing payment plans. If even half of them accept, we can start receiving shipments again. They worked until the sun began to set, painting the dusty street orange and gold. Tom left to scrounge up dinner, and Evelyn was alone in the store when she heard it. Horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. She went to the window and saw them. 5 riders, hard-faced men who looked like trouble had dressed up in leather and spurs. They stopped in front of the store, and one of them, a man with a scar that ran from his ear to his jaw, dismounted. The door scraped open, and Scarface entered, his eyes immediately finding her. You the new girl? The one giving Mr. Prescott trouble? I'm the bookkeeper. If Mr. Prescott has business with the store, he can conduct it during normal business hours. Scarface smiled, revealing teeth stained brown from tobacco. Oh, this ain't business. This is what you might call a social visit. Mr. Prescott wanted us to welcome you to Silver Creek properly. The other men had entered behind him, spreading out to block any escape route. Evelyn's heart was racing, but she forced her voice to remain steady. How thoughtful. Please tell Mr. Prescott I appreciate the gesture. Oh, we'll tell him, after we explain how things work around here. Scarface moved closer, and Evelyn could smell the whiskey and violence on him. See, Mr. Prescott owns this town. Every building, every business, every person in it. And newcomers, well, they need to learn their place. And what place would that be? Quiet and compliant. Or gone. Your choice. Evelyn lifted her chin, meeting his gaze despite every instinct screaming at her to run. I choose neither. Scarface's hand moved to his belt, where a knife handle protruded. Wrong answer, miss. The sound of a hammer cocking was loud in the suddenly silent store. Everyone turned to see Jonas standing in the doorway, a shotgun held with casual competence. Evening, boys, he said, his voice conversational. Bit late for shopping, isn't it? This ain't your concern, Mercer, Scarface said, but his hand moved away from the knife. Everything in this town concerns me. Jonas stepped inside, the shotgun never wavering. Especially when Prescott's dogs come sniffing around innocent women. She ain't innocent. She's been stirring up trouble. She's been doing bookkeeping. If that's trouble, then Prescott's got bigger problems than he thought. Jonas moved closer, and Evelyn noticed how the other men shifted nervously. They were afraid of him, she realized, or at least wary. Now, I think you boys should head back to wherever Prescott's keeping you. Tell him Miss Carter is under my protection. Your protection? Scarface laughed, but it sounded forced. Since when do you protect anyone, Mercer? Couldn't even protect your own. The shotgun swung toward him so fast that Evelyn barely saw the movement. Finish that sentence, Jonas said quietly. Please. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Scarface raised his hand slowly, backing toward the door. We're going. But this ain't over. Mr. Prescott doesn't forget. Neither do I. They left in a thunder of hoofbeats and dust, and Jonas lowered the shotgun. His hands, Evelyn noticed, were perfectly steady. Thank you, she said, surprised her voice didn't shake. They'll be back. I know. He looked at her then, really looked at her. You're not going to run, are you? No. Even though staying might get you killed. Mr. Mercer, Jonas, I've been dying a slow death my whole life. In the mills, working 16-hour days for pennies. In Boston, suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations. At least here, if I die, it'll be standing up for something. He was quiet for a long moment, then set the shotgun on the counter. You'll need to learn to shoot. I beg your pardon. If you're going to take on Prescott, you'll need to defend yourself. I can teach you. Why would you do that? Something flickered in his eyes, pain maybe, or memory. Because I've watched this town die by degrees for 5 years. Watched good people leave or give up or just fade away. And I told myself it wasn't my problem, wasn't my fight. But maybe I was wrong. What changed your mind? You did. He said it simply, without flourish or explanation. Tomorrow morning, dawn, at my forge. Bring something warmer than that dress. He left before she could respond, taking his shotgun and leaving her standing in the growing darkness of the store. Through the window, she could see the distant glow of his forge starting up, the rhythm of his hammer beginning its nightly song. Tom returned with dinner, beans again, with some questionable meat, and she told him about Prescott's men and Jonas's intervention. He said you were under his protection? Tom's eyebrows rose to his hairline. Jonas Mercer hasn't protected anything since his family died. Wouldn't even help when Prescott foreclosed on the Olsons last year. Maybe he's changing. Or maybe you're changing him. Tom gave her a knowing look. He's different around you. Still gruff, still closed off, but different. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks and busied herself with the unappetizing dinner. He's just being neighborly. Jonas Mercer hasn't been neighborly in 5 years. Trust me, this is something else. That night, lying on her cot and listening to the sound of the forge, Evelyn thought about choices. She'd chosen to answer those letters, chosen to leave Boston, chosen to stay in Silver Creek when every reasonable person would have fled. And now she'd chosen to fight a battle that might get her killed. But for the first time in her life, she felt like her choices mattered, like she mattered. Dawn came too soon, painted in shades of pink and gold that made even Silver Creek look almost beautiful. Evelyn dressed in her most practical clothes, the brown wool dress and a shawl that had seen better decades, and made her way through the empty streets to the forge. Jonas was already working, shaping what looked like a horseshoe with precise, powerful strokes. He'd tied his hair back, and his shirt was already soaked with sweat despite the morning chill. He looked up when she approached, setting aside his hammer. You came. You didn't think I would. I thought you might have developed some sense overnight. Sorry to disappoint. That almost smile appeared again. Come on, the range is out back. The range turned out to be a cleared area behind the forge with targets set up at various distances. Some proper bullseyes painted on wood, others just bottles and cans balanced on fence posts. Jonas produced a revolver, smaller than she'd expected, with worn grips that suggested years of use. This was my wife's, he said quietly. It's a good size for your hands. Evelyn took it carefully, surprised by the weight. She knew how to shoot? Everyone out here knows how to shoot, or should. He moved behind her, adjusting her grip. Don't fight the weight. Work with it. For the next hour, he taught her the basics. Stance, grip, breathing, aim. His hands would occasionally adjust her position, and each touch sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. He was patient but exacting, making her repeat each motion until it felt natural. Now, he said, stepping back. Hit the closest target. She missed. The shot went wide, striking the fence post instead of the bottle. Again. She missed again, closer this time, but still off the mark. You're thinking too much, Jonas said. Stop trying to calculate and just see the target. That doesn't make sense. Neither does staying in a dying town to fight a corrupt banker, but here you are. He moved closer again. Close your eyes. What? Trust me. She closed her eyes, acutely aware of his presence behind her. Now, picture the target. Not where it is, but what it is. See it breaking. See the bullet's path. Don't think it. See it. She opened her eyes, raised the gun, and fired. The bottle exploded in a shower of glass. Better, Jonas said, and she could hear approval in his voice. Again. They practiced until the sun was fully up, and her arms ached from the unfamiliar weight of the gun. She hit more targets than she missed, and Jonas seemed satisfied with her progress. Same time tomorrow, he said, taking the gun back. Unless you've come to your senses by then. Unlikely. Good. The word surprised them both. Jonas turned away quickly, busying himself with cleaning the revolver, but Evelyn had caught something in his expression, something that looked dangerously like hope. Walking back to the store, she encountered Ida Henderson carrying a basket of laundry. Heard you've been causing trouble, Ida said without preamble. News travels fast. Heard Jonas Mercer's taken an interest. He's teaching me to defend myself. Ida's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. That man hasn't taken an interest in anything for 5 years. You must be something special. I'm just someone who refuses to give up. Maybe that's what makes you special. Ida shifted her basket to her other hip. You want to know about Prescott? Real information, not Tom Garrett's secondhand gossip? Yes. Come to my house tonight after dinner. Bring that notebook you're always carrying, and bring Jonas if you can convince him. It's time someone heard the whole truth about what's been happening in this town. The rest of the day passed in a blur of ledgers and letters. Tom had received responses from 2 suppliers, cautiously positive responses that suggested they might resume shipments if partial payments were received. It was progress, small but real. Around midday, a woman entered the store. Chinese, elderly, but carrying herself with dignity despite her patched clothes. This had to be Mrs. Chen. You are the new bookkeeper, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Evelyn Carter, I am Chen Wei Lin. You may call me Mrs. Chen. She studied Evelyn with sharp, dark eyes. You stood up to Prescott. I pointed out some legal irregularities. And his men came for you. Jonas intervened. Yes. Jonas. Mrs. Chen moved closer to the counter. You are stirring still water, Miss Carter. Sometimes when water has been still too long, stirring brings up mud. Sometimes it brings up gold. Which do you think you'll find? Both, probably. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. You are not as foolish as you appear. I have records, from before the fire. Hidden. If you are serious about fighting Prescott, you will need them. Why haven't you brought them forward before? To whom? Judge Morrison, who drinks Prescott's whiskey? The sheriff who ran rather than face him? There was no one. She paused. Until now. You have Jonas's protection. That changes things. Why does his protection matter so much? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh her words. Jonas Mercer was not always a blacksmith. Before he came here, before his family, he was something else. Someone else. Prescott knows this. Prescott fears this. Before Evelyn could ask more questions, Mrs. Chen had turned and left, moving with surprising speed for someone her age. That evening, Evelyn stood outside Ida's house, trying to convince Jonas to come inside with her. He'd appeared at the store just as she was closing, somehow knowing about the meeting without being told. This isn't my fight, he said for the 3rd time. Isn't it? You've lived here for 8 years. You've watched Prescott destroy this town piece by piece. How is it not your fight? Because I stopped fighting 5 years ago. No, you didn't. You just started fighting different battles, fighting to keep working when there's no work, fighting to keep living when... She stopped, seeing the pain flash across his face. I'm sorry. That was cruel. It was honest. He looked at the house, then back at her. Why does this matter so much to you? You could leave, find another town, another life. With what money? And even if I could, what would I be leaving behind? The chance to actually make a difference? To build something instead of just surviving? She touched his arm lightly, feeling the muscle tense under her fingers. Jonas, I can't do this alone. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. You're going to get me killed, Evelyn Carter. Or I'm going to give you a reason to live again. The words hung between them, too honest, too raw. Jonas's gray eyes darkened with something that wasn't quite anger, but wasn't quite anything else either. One meeting, he said finally. That's all. Inside, Ida had assembled what looked like Silver Creek's last council of war. Mrs. Chen was there, along with a young woman who had to be Miss Winters, the schoolteacher, blonde, pretty in a faded way, with the look of someone who'd given up on dreams but couldn't quite stop hoping. Tom Garrett sat nervously on a wooden chair, and surprisingly, the Hendricks brothers were there. Two weathered men who looked like they'd been carved from the same piece of leather. Good, Ida said when she saw Jonas. Now, we can begin. For the next 2 hours, they pieced together the full story of Prescott's systematic destruction of Silver Creek. It was worse than Evelyn had imagined. Not just predatory lending and strategic foreclosures, but intimidation, violence, possibly murder. The Olson family, one of the Hendricks brothers said. Their well was poisoned 3 days after they refused to sell to Prescott. Lost half their cattle before they figured it out. My husband's death, Mrs. Chen added quietly. The doctor said it was heart failure. But my husband was healthy. He'd just refused to sell Prescott our property near the proposed railroad route. You know about the railroad? Evelyn asked. Everyone knows, Miss Winters said. Or suspects. Prescott's been too careful, too systematic. He's not collecting property in a dying town for sentiment. Then we need to be systematic too, Evelyn said, spreading out the notes she'd been taking. We need documentation, witnesses, a legal framework that can't be ignored, and we need to protect ourselves while we build it. How? Tom asked. Evelyn looked at Jonas. We organize. Create a town council, a real one, pool our resources. Make it harder for Prescott to pick us off one by one. A town council needs a sheriff, one of the Hendricks brothers pointed out. Everyone looked at Jonas. No, he said immediately. I'm not a lawman. You were once, Mrs. Chen said quietly. The room went silent. Evelyn stared at Jonas, seeing him suddenly in a new light. A lawman. That explained the way he held the shotgun, the way Prescott's men feared him. That was a different life, Jonas said, his voice hard. I'm not that man anymore. Maybe not, Ida said, but you're the only man in this town Prescott's afraid of. That has to count for something. Jonas stood abruptly. I said one meeting. I've given you that. He headed for the door, pausing only to look back at Evelyn. Tomorrow morning, don't be late. After he left, the energy seemed to drain from the room. Well, Ida said finally, at least he came. That's more than he's done in years. He'll come around, Mrs. Chen said, looking at Evelyn. You'll convince him. Why does everyone think I have some special influence over him? The others exchanged glances, and it was Miss Winters who finally answered. Because he looks at you the way he used to look at his wife. Like you're something worth protecting. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's ridiculous. He barely knows me. Sometimes that doesn't matter, Ida said. Sometimes people just recognize each other. Like calling to like, pain to pain, strength to strength. The meeting broke up soon after, with plans to meet again in 3 days. Walking back to the store in the darkness, Evelyn thought about what she'd learned. Jonas had been a lawman, had lost his family, had retreated into his forge and his isolation, hammering out horseshoes for horses that rarely came, maintaining his skills for a purpose that no longer existed. Until now. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the movement in the shadows. Almost. The gun lessons with Jonas had sharpened her awareness, made her notice things that didn't belong, like the figure pressed against the wall of the abandoned saloon. She kept walking, didn't change her pace, but her hand moved to the pocket where she'd started carrying a small knife Tom had given her. The figure followed, staying in the shadows but definitely following. The store was just ahead, but it would be locked, and fumbling with keys would make her vulnerable. The forge was lit, Jonas working late as always. She turned toward it instead, walking faster now, no longer pretending she hadn't noticed her pursuer. The figure broke into a run. Evelyn ran too, her skirts hampering her, her breath coming in gasps. The forge door was just ahead. A hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. It was Scarface, his breath reeking of whiskey, his eyes wild with something that might have been rage or might have been worse. "Thought you were smart," he snarled. "Thought you could hide behind Mercer. But he's not here now, is he?" Evelyn's hand found the knife, pulled it free, slashed wildly. The blade caught his arm, drawing blood and a curse. He backhanded her, sending her sprawling in the dirt, the knife flying from her grip. "Now you're going to learn." The sound of the hammer stopping was somehow louder than any gunshot. Scarface froze, looking toward the forge door where Jonas stood silhouetted against the firelight, his hammer still in his hand. "Run," Jonas said quietly. Scarface looked between them, calculating. Then he saw something in Jonas's face that made the decision for him. He ran, disappearing into the darkness like the coward he was. Jonas helped Evelyn to her feet, his hands gentle despite the strength in them. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." But she was shaking, reaction setting in. "Come inside." The forge was warm, almost too warm after the chill of fear. Jonas sat her on a bench, examined her face where Scarface had struck her. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as they traced the swelling. "This is my fault," he said. "How is this your fault?" "I made you a target, declaring my protection, teaching you to shoot. I should have known Prescott would escalate. I was already a target. You just made me a harder one to hit." He looked at her for a long moment, then turned away, busying himself with something at his workbench. "You should leave town. Take the next stage, I'll give you the money." "No." "Evelyn?" "No." She stood, walked over to him. "I'm not running. Not from Prescott. Not from his thugs. And not from whatever this is between us." He turned to face her, and they were standing very close, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the smoke and metal, and something uniquely Jonas. "There can't be anything between us," he said, but his voice was rough, uncertain. "Why not?" "Because I'm broken. Because everyone I care about dies. Because—" She kissed him. It was probably the boldest thing she'd ever done, more daring than facing down Prescott or fighting off Scarface. For a moment, Jonas stood frozen, and she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him, and he was kissing her back with a desperate hunger that spoke of 5 years of loneliness and loss. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "This is a mistake," Jonas said, but he didn't let go of her. "Probably," she agreed, "but I've made worse ones." That startled a laugh out of him, rusty but real. "You're impossible." "I've been told that before." He touched her face again, this time with something like wonder. "What are you doing to me, Evelyn Carter?" "Waking you up," she said. "The question is, are you ready to be awake?" He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The way he looked at her, the way he held her, said everything. Outside, Silver Creek slept its dying sleep. But here in the forge, surrounded by fire and possibility, something new was being born. Something that might be strong enough to save them all, or destroy them trying. The morning after the kiss, Evelyn woke to the sound of urgent knocking on the store's front door. She dressed quickly, her face still tender where Scarface had struck her, and found Tom already at the door with a telegram in his shaking hands. "It's from the territorial governor's office," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're sending an inspector. Someone filed a formal complaint about banking irregularities in Silver Creek." Evelyn took the telegram, reading it twice to make sure she understood correctly. An inspector would arrive within the week to investigate claims of usury, fraud, and intimidation. At the bottom, in the section for complainant, was a name she didn't recognize: Samuel J. Morrison. "Judge Morrison?" she asked, incredulous. "Our drunk judge filed this?" "Must have been during one of his sober moments," Tom said. "But why would he cross Prescott like this?" Before Evelyn could respond, the door scraped open again, and Prescott himself entered, his face purple with rage. Behind him stood 3 men, including Scarface with his arm in a sling. "You little bitch!" Prescott snarled, waving his own copy of the telegram. "You think you're clever, getting Morrison to file this complaint?" "I had nothing to do with Judge Morrison's decision. Evelyn said truthfully, though she suspected her confrontation with Prescott had sparked something in the old judge's conscience. "Don't lie to me!" Prescott slammed his fist on the counter, making the ledgers jump. Morrison hasn't been sober enough to write his own name in 2 years, and suddenly he's filing formal complaints with the territorial government. Perhaps he found his conscience, Evelyn suggested. It happens, even to the best of drunks. Prescott's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, but stopped when Jonas appeared in the doorway, his own weapon already drawn. "Morning, Prescott," Jonas said casually, though his gun never wavered. "Bit early for social calls, isn't it? This doesn't concern you, Mercer. Everything in this store concerns me. I'm a partner now." Evelyn glanced at him in surprise, but kept her expression neutral. Jonas moved into the store, positioning himself between her and Prescott's men. "Partner?" Prescott laughed, but it sounded forced. "Since when does a washed-up lawman turned blacksmith become a shopkeeper?" "Since someone started sending thugs after women in the night," Jonas replied. "Seems like the kind of thing a lawman should care about, even a washed-up one." The tension in the store could have been cut with a knife. Prescott's men shifted nervously, clearly wanting to act but afraid of Jonas. Finally, Prescott stepped back. "This inspector changes nothing," he said. "I own this town. Every building, every debt, every soul. And when the inspector leaves, finding nothing, of course, I'll still own it. And you'll wish you'd taken the stage when you had the chance." After they left, Jonas holstered his gun and turned to Evelyn. "Partner?" "You said it, not me. I meant it." He pulled out a leather pouch, heavy with coins. $50. Should be enough to buy a third of Tom's business, such as it is. Tom stared at the money like he'd never seen currency before. "Jonas, you don't have to." "I do. If we're going to fight Prescott, we need to be united. Legally united. Papers filed, everything official." He looked at Evelyn. "That inspector isn't going to find anything unless we can prove it. Prescott's had years to hide his crimes. We have less than a week to uncover them." "Then we'd better get started," Evelyn said. "Mrs. Chen mentioned hidden records. The Hendricks brothers must have documentation of their lost land. And Judge Morrison, if he filed that complaint, he might be willing to talk." "Morrison's probably sleeping off whatever courage he found in a bottle," Jonas said. "But you're right. We need everything we can find." They spent the morning dividing tasks. Tom would track down old customers who might have records of Prescott's loans. Jonas would talk to the Hendricks brothers and anyone else who'd lost property. Evelyn would work with Mrs. Chen to reconstruct what they could of the bank's records before the fire. Mrs. Chen's laundry was at the edge of town, a small building that somehow managed to stay cleaner than anything else in Silver Creek. Inside, the air smelled of soap and starch, and every surface was meticulously organized. Mrs. Chen led Evelyn to a back room where a trunk sat covered with a cloth. "My husband was the bank's accountant before Prescott took over," she explained, lifting the cloth to reveal a trunk filled with papers. "He kept copies of everything. His own protection, he called it. When he died, I hid these. I knew someday someone would need them." Evelyn spent hours going through the papers, her excitement growing with each discovery. Here were the original loan documents, showing reasonable interest rates. Here were the amended documents, with rates that tripled overnight. Here were foreclosure notices for properties whose owners had never missed a payment. "This is it," she breathed. "This proves everything." "Proving and convincing are different things," Mrs. Chen warned. "Prescott has friends in high places. Money buys many voices. But it can't buy them all. Not if we're loud enough." That afternoon, she met Jonas at the forge to practice shooting. Her aim was improving, but today Jonas seemed distracted, his instructions brief and his attention elsewhere. "What's wrong?" she finally asked. "The Hendricks brothers are gone." "Gone?" "Left in the night. Their ranch is empty, livestock scattered. No note, no word to anyone." He reloaded the revolver with sharp, angry movements. "Prescott got to them. Threatened them or bought them or both. Then we'll have to do without their testimony." "Evelyn, you don't understand. If Prescott can make the Hendricks run, men who've survived droughts and Indian raids and everything else this territory could throw at them, what chance do we have?" She took the gun from his hand, set it aside, and faced him directly. We have the truth. We have documentation, and we have something Prescott doesn't expect: people who refuse to run. People die refusing to run. People die running too. At least this way we die for something. He studied her face, his gray eyes searching for something. You really believe we can win this? I believe we have to try. Jonas, this town is dying anyway. Prescott's just the disease. We can either fight the disease or let it consume everything, including us. Especially us. She touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. But I'd rather burn bright fighting than fade away hiding. Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made. My wife said something similar once, right before the cholera took her. Tell me about her. It was the first time she'd asked directly, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the bench against the wall, sitting down heavily. Margaret. Her name was Margaret. We met in Kansas, where I was a deputy marshal. She was the daughter of a judge, educated, refined. Should have married a banker or a lawyer, not a lawman with more pride than sense. His voice softened with memory. But she chose me anyway. Said I made her feel safe in a world that wasn't. What happened in Kansas? I testified against some powerful men, cattle barons who'd been killing homesteaders, making it look like Indian raids. My testimony sent 3 of them to prison. He paused. Their friends didn't take it well. There were threats, attempts on my life, so we ran. Came here, where nobody knew us. I became a blacksmith. She became a mother. We had 3 good years. Then the cholera came. Jonas, I'm so sorry. It took her first. Our daughter Emily lasted 3 more days. She was 4 years old. His hands clenched and unclenched rhythmically. I should have been able to protect them. Should have seen the sickness coming, should have taken them away. Instead, I watched them die, one after the other, while Prescott offered loans for medicine that didn't work, and coffins I couldn't afford without his blood money. Now Evelyn understood. The isolation, the anger, the way he'd retreated into his forge. He'd failed to protect his family once, and he'd sworn never to care enough to fail again. It wasn't your fault, she said softly. Wasn't it? I brought them here. I chose this place, this life. If we'd stayed in Kansas, if I'd faced those threats instead of running, they might have killed all of you, or you might have died of cholera there, or 1,000 other possibilities. She sat beside him, close but not touching. Jonas, you can't protect people from life. You can only love them while they're here. Is that what we're doing? Loving each other? The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and delicate as blown glass. Evelyn felt her heart racing, but she met his gaze steadily. I don't know. Maybe. Is that so terrible? Yes, he said immediately. Then, no, I don't know. He stood, pacing to the forge and back. I swore I'd never... I can't lose someone again, Evelyn. I can't. Then don't lose me. Fight beside me instead of trying to protect me from the fight. Before he could respond, they heard shouting from the direction of town. They ran toward the sound, finding a crowd gathered in front of the courthouse. Judge Morrison stood on the steps, sober for perhaps the first time in years, holding a document above his head. Citizens of Silver Creek, he called out, his voice stronger than anyone had heard it in years. I have here a confession, my own confession, detailing years of corruption, bribery, and illegal foreclosures orchestrated by Silas Prescott. The crowd murmured in shock. Prescott himself pushed through, his face nearly purple with rage. You're drunk, Morrison. You don't know what you're saying. I'm sober, Morrison replied. For the first time in too long, I'm sober. And I'm done being your puppet. He looked directly at Evelyn. Miss Carter was right. We've let fear rule us too long. I've let whiskey and guilt drown my conscience, but no more. When that inspector arrives, I'll tell him everything. Every bribe I took, every illegal foreclosure I approved, every document I helped destroy. You'll hang for this, Prescott snarled. Probably. But you'll hang beside me. The judge turned to go back inside, but Prescott pulled his gun. The shot was impossibly loud in the quiet afternoon, and Morrison crumpled on the courthouse steps, blood spreading across his shirt. Several women screamed. Men reached for weapons they weren't carrying, and in the chaos, Prescott stood with his smoking gun, looking as shocked as anyone by what he'd done. "Self-defense," he said quickly. "You all saw him threaten me. He was drunk, violent. He was unarmed," Jonas said, stepping forward. His own gun was drawn, pointed steadily at Prescott. "Everyone here saw you murder an unarmed man. My men saw different. Your men aren't here." Jonas gestured to the crowd. "These people are. The real citizens of Silver Creek, not your hired thugs." Evelyn knelt beside Morrison, pressing her shawl against his wound. He was still breathing, but barely. His eyes found hers, and he pressed something into her hand. A key. "Safe," he whispered. "Behind the portrait. Everything's there." Then his eyes went blank, and Judge Samuel Morrison, corrupt and redeemed, was dead. Evelyn stood slowly, blood on her hands and dress. "Murderer," she said clearly, looking at Prescott, in front of 20 witnesses. "No one will testify against me," Prescott said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "I will," Mrs. Chen said, stepping forward. "And I," said Tom. One by one, the crowd spoke up. The people Prescott had crushed, threatened, and impoverished, finally finding their voices in the face of blatant murder. Prescott backed away, his gun swinging wildly from person to person. "You'll all regret this. My brother's men will burn this town to the ground." "Let them try," Jonas said. "Now get out. Take your horse and ride, and don't come back. If I see you again, you won't get a trial." For a moment it looked like Prescott might shoot. Then he seemed to realize he was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. He backed toward his horse, mounted awkwardly, and rode hard out of town. The crowd dispersed slowly, everyone shaken by what they'd witnessed. Jonas helped Evelyn wrap Morrison's body in a blanket, and they carried him into the courthouse. Inside Morrison's office, behind a portrait of President Cleveland, they found the safe. The key Morrison had given Evelyn opened it easily. Inside were documents that made even Mrs. Chen's hidden records pale in comparison. Prescott's entire criminal enterprise was laid out in meticulous detail: bribes, murders, forged documents, plans for the railroad scheme. Morrison had documented everything, perhaps knowing that one day his conscience would demand action. "This is enough," Jonas said, reading through the papers. "More than enough. The inspector will have to act on this." "If Prescott doesn't come back with an army first," Tom said nervously. "Then we'd better prepare for a siege," Evelyn replied. She looked around the room at the gathered townspeople. "We have 3 days until the inspector arrives. We need to organize defenses, gather weapons, and make sure these documents survive no matter what happens." "I'll coordinate the defenses," Jonas said. "Tom, inventory every weapon and round of ammunition in town. Mrs. Chen, organize the women to prepare medical supplies and food stores. Evelyn, I'll create copies of all these documents," she said. "Multiple copies hidden in different places. If Prescott tries to destroy the evidence, he'll have to burn the whole town." "He might just do that," someone muttered. "Then we'll rebuild," Evelyn said firmly. "But we won't surrender." That night, the town transformed. People who'd barely spoken in years worked side by side, boarding windows, filling water barrels, cleaning rifles that hadn't been fired in decades. The forge rang with the sound of Jonas's hammer as he repaired weapons and made ammunition. The store became a command center, with Evelyn coordinating supplies while creating her copies of the evidence. Miss Winters, the schoolteacher, surprised everyone by revealing she could handle a rifle better than most men. "My father was an army sergeant," she explained. "He believed his daughters should be able to defend themselves. Even the Mexican miners from the old camp came down, offering their help. They'd suffered under Prescott too, paid less than subsistence wages for dangerous work, and they were ready to fight." As Evelyn worked by lamplight, copying page after page of damning evidence, Jonas came in carrying a tray of food. "You need to eat. I need to finish this." "You need to eat," he repeated, setting the tray down firmly. "And sleep. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." She set down her pen, flexing cramped fingers. "Is this what it was like? Being a marshal?" "Sometimes. The waiting was always the hardest part, knowing trouble was coming but not knowing when or how." "Were you afraid?" Always. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you make mistakes. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Are you afraid now? Terrified, she admitted. But also alive. More alive than I've felt in years. Is that strange? No. Facing death has a way of making life sweeter. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I was wrong before. About not caring. I already care. I can't help it. Jonas, let me finish. I care about you, Evelyn. More than I wanted to, more than I thought I could. And that terrifies me more than Prescott and all his guns. She turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. I care about you too, and I'm terrified too. But isn't that better than feeling nothing? I don't know, maybe. He touched her face gently, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. If we survive this, when we survive this. When we survive this, he corrected with a small smile, I want to court you properly. Not in the middle of gunfights and conspiracies, but properly. Dinners and walks and all the things Margaret said I was terrible at. I'd like that, she said softly. Though I should warn you, I'm not very good at being courted. I tend to be too direct, too stubborn. He kissed her, cutting off her self-criticism. It was different from their first kiss, less desperate and more certain, a promise rather than a question. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Be direct. Be stubborn. Be yourself. That's who I'm falling in love with. The word love hung between them, acknowledged but not quite claimed. Not yet. There would be time for that later when the dust settled and the blood dried, if they survived. The second day brought scouts, Prescott's men riding close to town, counting defenders, measuring resolve. Jonas had positioned watchers on the roofs, and every approach was covered. The scouts rode away without engaging, but everyone knew they were reporting back to Prescott. That evening, Ida Henderson surprised everyone by pulling out an old Henry rifle. Was my husband's, she said. Haven't fired it in 10 years, but I remember how. The preparations continued through the night. Evelyn had finished her copies, hiding them in 5 different locations, including one buried beneath the forge, one in Mrs. Chen's laundry, and one sealed in a jar at the bottom of the well. Even if Prescott burned every building, some evidence would survive. The morning of the third day dawned clear and cold. Everyone was at their posts when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Riders, at least a dozen, maybe more. Get ready, Jonas called from his position on the courthouse roof. He'd taken command naturally, everyone deferring to his experience. Remember, we just need to hold until the inspector arrives. Make them earn every inch. Evelyn stood at a window in the store. The revolver Jonas had given her steady in her hands. Through the glass, she could see the riders approaching. Prescott was in the lead and beside him. That's not his brother's outfit, Tom said, peering through his own window. Those are federal badges. The riders came to a stop in the middle of the main street, and a man in a dark suit dismounted. He was younger than Evelyn had expected, with sharp eyes and an air of authority that had nothing to do with age. I'm Inspector James Crawford from the Territorial Governor's Office, he called out. I'm here to investigate reports of banking irregularities, and he looked at Prescott. What appears to be an armed insurrection. These people are criminals, Prescott said quickly. They've seized the town, killed Judge Morrison. You killed Morrison, someone shouted from a window. Crawford held up a hand for silence. I'll need to hear from everyone. Mr. Prescott, you'll surrender your weapons and submit to questioning. Like hell I will. I own this town. These people are squatters and thieves. Then you should have no problem proving that legally, Crawford said calmly. Surrender your weapons or I'll have my men take them. For a tense moment, it looked like violence might erupt. Then Jonas appeared in the street, his rifle lowered but ready. Inspector Crawford, I'm Jonas Mercer, formerly Deputy Marshal Jonas Mercer of Kansas. I can provide evidence of Mr. Prescott's crimes, including the murder of Judge Morrison 2 days ago in front of 20 witnesses. Crawford's eyes sharpened with interest. Deputy Marshal Mercer, I've heard of you. The Cattle Baron trials. Yes, sir. I thought you were dead, just retired, but recent events have brought me back to active involvement. Crawford nodded slowly, then turned back to Prescott. Mr. Prescott, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder. You'll come with me peacefully, or you'll come with me in chains. Your choice. Prescott's hand moved toward his gun, but 3 federal marshals had their weapons trained on him before he could draw. Slowly, he raised his hands. This isn't over, he snarled, looking at Evelyn. You think you've won, but I have friends. Powerful friends. So do we, Evelyn said, stepping out of the store. She held up the packet of documents. Inspector Crawford, I have here evidence of systematic fraud, usury, intimidation, and murder spanning 5 years. Judge Morrison compiled most of it before his death, and we have supporting documentation from multiple sources. Crawford took the packet, flipping through it quickly. His expression grew grimmer with each page. This is extensive. Mr. Prescott, you'll be coming with me to the territorial capital immediately. The rest of my men will stay here to conduct a full investigation. As the federal marshals led Prescott away in chains, the town seemed to exhale collectively. People emerged from buildings, blinking in the sunlight like creatures emerging from a long hibernation. Is it over? Miss Winters asked. The fight is, Jonas said. The work is just beginning. He was right. Over the next week, Inspector Crawford and his team interviewed every resident, documented every crime, and began the process of untangling Prescott's web of corruption. Properties were returned to their rightful owners. Debts were invalidated. The hidden railroad documents were discovered, revealing that several powerful men in the territorial government were involved in the scheme. The scandal reached all the way to Washington, making Silver Creek briefly famous as the little town that fought back. Journalists arrived, eager for the story of the mail-order bride who'd brought down a corrupt empire. But Evelyn avoided them, focusing instead on the work of rebuilding. With Prescott's stranglehold broken, the town began to show signs of life. The Hendricks brothers returned, shamefaced but determined to help. New families arrived, drawn by the promise of cheap land and a fresh start. Tom's store began to thrive, especially after several suppliers, impressed by Evelyn's meticulous bookkeeping and the story of the town's resurrection, extended generous credit terms. The shelves filled with goods, and customers actually had money to spend. A month after Prescott's arrest, Jonas found Evelyn in the store, reconciling accounts with her usual precision. The bruise on her face had faded, but she still wore her hair pulled back severely, still dressed in practical browns and grays. "Close the ledger," he said. "I'm almost finished. Close it." She looked up, surprised by his tone. He was clean-shaven for the first time since she'd met him, wearing a fresh shirt and what looked like new boots. In his hand was a small bouquet of wildflowers, scraggly things, but flowers nonetheless. "What's this?" "Proper courting," he said, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I told you I would, once things settled." "Jonas Mercer, are you asking me on an actual social call?" "I'm asking you to walk with me. Maybe have dinner, like normal people who aren't fighting for their lives." She closed the ledger, stood, and smoothed her skirts. "I should change. You're perfect as you are. You're always perfect as you are." They walked through Silver Creek as the sun set, painting the buildings gold and hiding their scars. The town wasn't healed, might never fully heal, but it was alive. Children played in the street. The saloon had reopened with actual music drifting from its doors. Someone was building a new house on a lot that had stood empty for years. "I have something for you," Jonas said as they reached the forge. He led her inside to his workbench, where something lay covered with a cloth. "It's not much, but—" He pulled away the cloth to reveal an iron rose beautifully crafted with delicate petals that seemed impossible for such a hard medium. It was attached to a pin that could be worn as a brooch. "Jonas, it's beautiful." "It's a promise," he said. "Iron doesn't wilt or fade. It lasts. Like what we're building here. Like what I hope we're building together." She took the rose, running her fingers over the intricate metalwork. "Are you asking me something, Jonas Mercer?" "I'm asking everything," he admitted. "I'm asking you to stay, to build a life here with me. To take a chance on a broken-down former lawman who's only just remembering how to hope again." "I already took that chance," she said softly. "The day I decided to fight instead of run. The day you decided to stand with me. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to everything. To staying, to building, to hoping. She pinned the iron rose to her dress, to loving even when it terrifies us. He kissed her then, there in the forge where so much had been broken down and reformed. Outside, Silver Creek continued its slow resurrection, but inside, two people who'd come to this place already ghosts found themselves suddenly, brilliantly alive. The wedding took place 3 months later, on the day the railroad company announced that Silver Creek would indeed be a stop on the new Northern Line. The whole town attended, even the Mexican miners who'd decided to stay and try their hand at farming the newly available land. Evelyn wore her mother's wedding dress, sent from Boston with a letter of grudging approval and surprised admiration for her daughter's courage. Jonas wore his marshal's badge, newly reinstated by the territorial governor who'd insisted the town needed proper law enforcement. Tom Garrett served as best man, his store now successful enough that he'd hired 2 clerks. Mrs. Chen stood as matron of honor, her dignity and grace lending the simple ceremony an unexpected elegance. Miss Winters played the piano they'd somehow acquired for the schoolhouse, and Ida Henderson cried through the entire ceremony, claiming it was just dust in her eyes. As they exchanged vows in the little church that had been boarded up but was now restored, Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd left Boston as a desperate woman chasing an illusion, arrived in Silver Creek as a discarded bride with 17 cents to her name. But she'd found something better than the lies that had lured her west. She'd found purpose in a dying town's struggle to survive. She'd found strength she didn't know she possessed. And she'd found love not in the promised letters of a dead man, but in the scarred heart of a living one who'd needed her courage as much as she'd needed his protection. "Do you, Evelyn Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the circuit preacher asked. "I do," she said clearly, looking into Jonas's gray eyes that were no longer storms but calm seas. "Do you, Jonas Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," he said, his voice strong and certain. "Then, by the power vested in me by Wyoming territory, I pronounce you husband and wife." When Jonas kissed her, the whole town erupted in cheers. Someone fired a gun in the air in celebration, causing the federal marshal who'd stayed to oversee the town's transition to reach for his weapon before realizing it was friendly fire. The reception was held in the street, tables cobbled together from salvaged wood, food contributed by everyone who could spare it. It wasn't fancy. The cake was lopsided. The music was provided by a fiddle and a guitar that couldn't quite stay in tune, but it was joyful in a way that Silver Creek hadn't been in years. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Evelyn and Jonas danced in the street where she'd first arrived, where Prescott had threatened her, where Judge Morrison had died, where everything had changed. The same dust that had seemed like death when she'd stepped off the stagecoach now swirled around them like blessing. "Do you ever regret it?" Jonas asked as they swayed together. "Coming here? Everything that happened? How can I regret the path that led me to you?" she replied. "To this? This isn't what you expected when you answered those letters." "No," she agreed. "It's better. Marcus Henderson's letters promised me roses and prosperity. You gave me an iron rose and a fighting chance. I know which one I prefer." He spun her around, making her laugh, a sound that drew smiles from the watching townspeople. This was what Silver Creek had needed, what they'd all needed. Not just survival, but joy. Not just endurance, but hope. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Jonas led Evelyn to their new home. Not the room behind the forge, but a real house they'd claimed from Prescott's seized properties. It needed work, like everything in Silver Creek, but it was theirs. On the doorstep, he stopped. "There's something I should tell you. If you're about to confess to another wife somewhere, the timing is terrible." He smiled. "No, nothing like that. It's about the letters, the ones that brought you here." "What about them?" "I think I know who sent them." Evelyn stared at him. "Who?" "Morrison. Before he became a drunk, he was a romantic. He talked once about how the town needed new blood, new hope. I think he found Marcus's old letters and sent them out, hoping to bring in women who might marry the men here, might help save the town. He lied to all those women, to me." "Yes, but if he hadn't, you wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here." Jonas touched her face gently. I can't be sorry for the lie that brought me truth." Evelyn considered this, then smiled. "Neither can I, though it's a good thing he's already dead, or I'd have to shoot him on principle." Jonas laughed, a full, rich sound that seemed to surprise him. "Mrs. Mercer, you are a dangerous woman." "Mr. Mercer, you have no idea." He carried her over the threshold, a tradition even in a town that had forgotten most traditions. Inside, the house was sparse but clean, waiting to be filled with life and memory. As Jonas set her down, Evelyn moved to the window, looking out at Silver Creek. Lanterns still glowed in the street, music still drifted on the air. The town that had been dying was learning to live again, and she'd been part of that resurrection. "What are you thinking?" Jonas asked, coming up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I'm thinking that sometimes the best journeys are the ones where you don't end up where you expected." She leaned back against him. "I came here to be a mail-order bride to a ghost. Instead, I became a fighter, a builder, a wife to a man who forged me an iron rose." "And I was a ghost myself," Jonas said quietly, "until you brought me back to life." They stood there together, watching their town celebrate below, two people who'd found each other in the ruins and chosen to build something new. Outside, Silver Creek continued its tentative dance with hope. Its buildings still scarred but no longer empty, its streets still dusty but no longer silent. The iron rose on Evelyn's dress caught the lamplight, gleaming with promise. It would never wilt, never fade, never die. Like the love forged in the fire of adversity, like the town reborn from its own ashes, like the future they would build together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, not yet arriving but coming soon, bringing prosperity and growth and all the complications of progress. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, there was only celebration, only joy, only the triumph of having survived and chosen to thrive. Silver Creek had been saved, not by the railroad or the government or even justice, but by people who'd refused to give up, by a mail-order bride who'd refused to be defeated, by a blacksmith who'd remembered how to fight, by a town that had remembered how to hope. And in that house on that night, as Jonas and Evelyn began their life together, the ghost town that had almost been finally, fully, came back to life. The first winter as husband and wife tested them in ways that gunfire and corruption never had. The November snow came early and hard, blanketing Silver Creek in white that hid its scars but also its paths forward. Jonas had been working 18-hour days at the forge, fulfilling orders for the railroad construction crews that had finally arrived. Evelyn managed the store's accounts and helped coordinate supplies for the 20 new families who'd moved to town since Prescott's arrest. It was during a particularly fierce blizzard that the fever came. Evelyn noticed Jonas's flushed face at breakfast, but said nothing, knowing he'd work through anything short of death. By noon, when Tom came to the house saying Jonas had collapsed at the forge, she was already prepared with the medical supplies she'd been gathering. "It's not cholera," she said firmly, as much to herself as to Tom, who'd gone pale at finding Jonas unconscious. "It's exhaustion and pneumonia, nothing more." But as she sat beside their bed, cooling his burning forehead with damp cloths while the wind howled outside, she understood the terror that had driven Jonas into isolation after losing his family. The helplessness of watching someone you love suffer, unable to do anything but wait and hope. "Don't you dare die on me, Jonas Mercer," she whispered, gripping his hand. "We've come too far for you to leave me now." Mrs. Chen arrived with herbs and traditional remedies, moving with quiet efficiency. "He is strong," she said, preparing a tea that smelled of ginger and something bitter. "But strength alone does not heal. He must choose to stay." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes when the body is weak, the spirit remembers other paths. Easier paths." Mrs. Chen's dark eyes were knowing. He lost them in winter. Part of him might think it fitting to follow. Evelyn's hand tightened on Jonas's. "Then I'll remind him why he needs to stay." For 3 days and nights, while the blizzard raged, she barely left his side. She talked to him constantly, telling him about the town's progress, reading from the engineering books she'd found at his forge, describing their future in detail that made it real and solid as iron. "The railroad will be complete by spring," she said, spooning broth between his cracked lips. "We'll need to expand the store." Tom's already talking about building a second floor for additional goods. And Miss Winters wants to start a proper school, not just the one room she's using now. She'll need desks, supplies. The forge will be busier than ever. Sometimes he stirred, his gray eyes opening briefly before closing again. Once, he squeezed her hand and mumbled something that sounded like Margaret, and Evelyn's heart cracked a little, but she kept talking, kept fighting for him the way he'd fought for her. On the fourth morning, she woke from an exhausted doze in the chair beside the bed to find Jonas watching her with clear eyes. "You look terrible," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. "You're one to talk." The relief made her dizzy. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by horses." Several times. He tried to sit up, winced, and let her push him back down. "How long?" 4 days. "The orders can wait. The town's not going anywhere." He studied her face, taking in the dark circles, the unwashed hair, the clothes she'd been wearing for days. "You stayed. Where else would I be? You could have—" He stopped, something shifting in his expression. "You called me back. I heard you. Every time I started to drift, you called me back." "Good. I'd have followed you into death itself and dragged you back if necessary." "Evelyn, no." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "No more talk of leaving, of following, of anything but living. We're building something here, Jonas, together, and I won't let you abandon it or me." He caught her hand, kissed her palm. "I'm not going anywhere." The recovery was slow, forcing Jonas to accept help in ways that chafed against his independence. Young Sam Morrison, Judge Morrison's nephew, who'd arrived for the funeral and decided to stay, took over the forge's simple work. The railroad crews grumbled but waited. And slowly, as winter deepened, Jonas regained his strength. It was during his convalescence that Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for weeks but hadn't wanted to hope, hadn't wanted to tell Jonas while he was still recovering. But when Mrs. Chen confirmed it with a knowing smile and gentle hands on her belly, Evelyn couldn't contain the mixture of joy and terror that flooded through her. She told Jonas on Christmas Eve, after the town's first proper Christmas celebration in years. The church had been decorated with pine boughs and ribbons, made from scraps of fabric from Tom's store. Someone had managed to get a turkey from somewhere, and the entire town had feasted together, sharing what they had in a potluck that turned into a banquet of community. Jonas was sitting by their fireplace, still thin from his illness but growing stronger daily, when Evelyn sat beside him and took his hand. "I have something to tell you." He looked at her, immediately alert to her serious tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's— Jonas, we're going to have a baby." The silence stretched so long that Evelyn began to worry. Jonas's face had gone pale, his hand tightening on hers almost painfully. "Jonas? A baby?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You're sure?" Mrs. Chen confirmed it. Late June, she thinks. He pulled his hand away, stood, and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling gently, covering Silver Creek in fresh white. Evelyn watched his back, seeing the tension in every line of his body. "Say something," she said finally. "I can't do this again." The words were torn from him. "I can't lose another child. I can't—" "You won't." She stood, moved to him, turned him to face her. "Jonas, look at me. This isn't 5 years ago. There's no cholera. We have clean water now, medical supplies, Mrs. Chen's knowledge. Dr. Patterson from the railroad camp has agreed to stay in town. Things happen. Babies die. Mothers die." His eyes were wild with remembered grief. "I've already buried one family, Evelyn. I can't bury another." "Then don't. Fight for this one. Fight with me." She took his face in her hands. "Jonas, we can't live our lives afraid of loss. Yes, something could happen. Something could happen to any of us at any time. But we can't let fear stop us from living, from hoping, from creating life. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. We choose hope or we choose fear. Every day we choose." She pressed his hand to her still flat stomach. "This child is already choosing. Choosing to grow, to live, to be. Will you choose with us? Jonas dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her belly. She felt him shaking and realized he was crying, silent sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside him. I'm terrified, he whispered. So am I. But we'll be terrified together. He looked up at her and she saw something breaking open in his eyes. Not breaking apart, but breaking free. A baby. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He stood, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her with a desperate tenderness that said everything words couldn't. When they finally parted, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. June, he said, we have 6 months to prepare. 6 months to turn this house into a proper home. 6 months to make sure this town is safe for our child. Our child. Evelyn tested the words, found them perfect. Our child will grow up in Silver Creek, in the town we helped save. The town you saved, Jonas corrected. I just provided muscle. We saved it together, and we'll raise this child together. The winter months that followed were a flurry of preparation and growth. The railroad construction brought more workers, more families, more business than Silver Creek had seen in its best days. Tom's store expanded into the building next door. Miss Winters got her new schoolhouse. The saloon added a restaurant section that served actual food instead of just whiskey and regret. Jonas threw himself into preparing for the baby with an intensity that might have been concerning if Evelyn hadn't understood it. Every piece of furniture he built was tested for stability a dozen times. The crib he crafted was a work of art, carved with delicate roses that echoed the iron one Evelyn still wore every day. He installed new locks on every door and window, reinforced the walls, made their home into something that could withstand anything. You can't protect the baby from everything, Evelyn said one evening, finding him checking the window locks for the 3rd time. I can try. Jonas, I know. He turned from the window, pulled her close, carefully, always carefully now that her belly had begun to round. I know I can't control everything, but let me control what I can. Let me make this place safe. She understood. This was his way of choosing hope, of fighting fear. Every lock, every reinforcement, every carefully crafted piece of furniture was an act of faith that there would be a child to use them. Spring arrived with the railroad. The first official train pulled into Silver Creek on April 15, 1890, and the entire town turned out to celebrate. Banners stretched across Main Street, the band from the railroad camp played, and speeches were made by various dignitaries who'd never heard of Silver Creek until it became briefly famous for standing up to corruption. Evelyn stood with Jonas on the platform they'd built beside the new depot, watching the black engine steam to a stop. She was obviously pregnant now, her condition drawing knowing smiles from the women and respectful nods from the men. In a town that had nearly died, new life was especially precious. Look at that, Jonas said, his arm around her waist. 6 months ago, we thought this place was finished. Now look at it. The town had transformed. New buildings were going up weekly. The population had tripled. There was talk of incorporating officially, of electing a proper mayor and town council. Silver Creek was no longer dying. It was thriving. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer. They turned to see a young man stepping down from the train, well-dressed and carrying a leather portfolio. He looked familiar, but Evelyn couldn't place him until he smiled. Robert Henderson, he said, extending his hand. Marcus's cousin from Chicago. I heard about what happened here, about how you saved the town from Prescott. I had to come see for myself. Evelyn stiffened, remembering the letters, the deception that had brought her here. Jonas's arm tightened around her protectively. I know about the letters, Robert continued quickly, about the trick that was played on you and the other women. I'm deeply sorry for my family's inadvertent role in that deception. Marcus, he wasn't a bad man, just weak, and someone used his weakness to hurt innocent people. That's in the past, Evelyn said carefully. What brings you here now? Redemption, perhaps, and business. Robert opened his portfolio. I represent a group of investors interested in Silver Creek's future. We want to build a hotel, a proper one, to serve railroad passengers and the growing population. We'd like to hire local workers, use local materials, make it a true community project. Jonas and Evelyn exchanged glances. Investment could be good for the town, but they'd learn to be wary of outsiders bearing gifts. We'd want to review any contracts carefully, Jonas said, and the town council would need to approve. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything less from the town that took down Silas Prescott. Robert smiled. I'll be staying for a few weeks, getting to know the community. Perhaps we could discuss it further? As Robert walked away to find lodging, Evelyn watched him go with mixed feelings. The Henderson name had brought her here through deception, but that deception had led to everything good in her life now. You all right? Jonas asked. Yes, it's just strange how things circle back. The Hendersons brought me here with lies, and now they want to invest in our truth. Our truth, Jonas repeated, his hand moving to rest on her belly. I like that. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, and they both laughed. May brought unexpected challenges. The rapid growth stressed the town's resources. Water became scarce, sanitation was a problem, and tensions arose between old-timers and newcomers. At a heated town meeting, voices were raised and accusations flew. You newcomers don't understand, Ida Henderson was saying. This town has ways of doing things. Ways that nearly killed it, interrupted James Sullivan, a recent arrival who'd opened a hardware store. We need modern approaches. We need to remember who saved this town in the first place, Tom Garrett added, but his voice was lost in the arguing. Evelyn stood, and gradually the room quieted. Her pregnancy gave her a certain authority. She was literally carrying Silver Creek's future. We're all right, she said calmly. The old-timers are right that this town has traditions worth preserving. The newcomers are right that we need fresh ideas. But we're all wrong if we think fighting each other is the answer. Then what do you suggest? Sullivan asked with barely concealed frustration. Integration, pairing old-timers with newcomers for town projects, sharing knowledge both ways. She looked around the room. Mrs. Chen, you know more about water management than anyone. You kept your laundry running through 3 droughts. Mr. Sullivan, you have experience with modern plumbing systems. Work together. That's all well and good, Ida said, but who makes the final decisions? We do. All of us. Through proper elections, proper councils, proper procedures. Evelyn's hand went to her belly as the baby kicked. This child will grow up in Silver Creek. I want it to be a town where everyone's voice matters, where tradition and progress can coexist. The meeting ended more peacefully, with committees formed and partnerships established. Walking home, Jonas took her hand. You're good at this. Leadership. I'm good at bookkeeping. People are much more complicated than ledgers. But you see patterns, connections, ways to balance opposing forces. Like us? She asked with a smile. The broken lawman and the desperate bride. We weren't opposites. We were 2 sides of the same coin, people who'd given up on life finding reasons to fight for it. June came with oppressive heat and Evelyn's increasing discomfort. She could barely sleep, her back ached constantly, and the baby seemed determined to kick every internal organ she possessed. Jonas hovered anxiously, driving her half-mad with his constant concern. I'm pregnant, not dying, she snapped one morning after he'd tried to prevent her from walking to the store. You're 9 months pregnant. The baby could come any time. Then it will come. Women have been having babies for thousands of years, Jonas. I'm not that special. You are to me. The simple honesty of it deflated her irritation. She touched his face, feeling the familiar rasp of stubble. I'm sorry. I'm just scared too, I suppose. And this heat isn't helping. Mrs. Chen says first babies often come late. Mrs. Chen also says I'm carrying low, which means it's a boy, and that eating spicy food will make labor easier. Do you believe her? I believe she's delivered more babies than anyone else in this town, so I'll take whatever wisdom she offers. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Evelyn felt the first contraction. It was mild, just a tightening, but she knew instantly what it was. Jonas. He was immediately alert. Is it? I think so, but first babies take time. Mrs. Chen said. Another contraction, stronger this time, cut off her words. Jonas was on his feet immediately. I'll get Mrs. Chen. And Dr. Patterson. And Jonas. She caught his hand. Stay with me for just a moment, please. He sat back down, gathering her into his arms carefully. They sat together as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, as the first stars appeared, as Silver Creek settled into evening routines. Somewhere, the saloon piano was playing. Somewhere, children were being called in for supper. Somewhere, life was continuing its ancient patterns. "Whatever happens," Evelyn said quietly, "I want you to know that these have been the best months of my life. Coming here, fighting for this town, falling in love with you, I regret none of it. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to be fine. The baby's going to be fine. I know, but I needed to say it, needed you to know." Another contraction made her gasp, and Jonas helped her to her feet. "Let's get you inside." The labor was long and difficult. Through the night and into the next day, Evelyn struggled to bring their child into the world. Jonas never left her side, letting her crush his hand during contractions, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. Mrs. Chen was calm and efficient, her weathered hands gentle. Dr. Patterson hovered nervously. He was young, fresh from medical school, and clearly intimidated by Mrs. Chen's experience. "You're doing fine," Mrs. Chen said during a brief respite between contractions. "The baby is strong. You are strong." "I don't feel strong." Evelyn gasped. "Strength isn't about feeling. It's about continuing." Hour after hour, the labor continued. The sun rose, traveled across the sky, began to sink again. Tom came by with supplies. Miss Winters brought fresh linens. Ida Henderson paced the porch like a guard. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. Then, as the sun touched the horizon on the second day, painting the room golden, the baby finally came. A boy, as Mrs. Chen had predicted, with a strong cry that seemed to announce Silver Creek's newest citizen to the world. "He's perfect," Dr. Patterson said, checking the infant with shaking hands. 10 fingers, 10 toes, good color, strong lungs. Jonas was crying openly as Mrs. Chen placed the baby in Evelyn's arms. The infant was red and wrinkled and the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Our son," she whispered, touching the downy dark hair that was already showing his father's stubborn curl. "Our son," Jonas repeated, his voice full of wonder. "What should we name him?" Evelyn looked at the baby, then at Jonas, then out the window at the town they'd helped save. "Samuel," she said. "Samuel Marcus Mercer." After Judge Morrison? After a flawed man who found his conscience. After the Hendersons who brought us together through deception but ultimately led to truth. After all the imperfect choices that led to this perfect moment. Jonas kissed her forehead, then touched his son's tiny hand, watching in amazement as the baby's fingers curled around his. "Samuel it is." The news spread through town within minutes. Church bells rang, not in alarm but in celebration. People gathered outside the house, not intrusive but present, sharing in the joy of new life in a town that had nearly died. That night, as Evelyn dozed with Samuel at her breast and Jonas kept watch like a guardian angel, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate woman answering false letters, a broken man hiding in his forge, a dying town gasping for breath. Now she was a mother, a wife, a respected member of a thriving community. Jonas had found his way back to life and purpose, and Silver Creek had been reborn, stronger for having survived its trials. "Thank you," Jonas whispered in the darkness. "For what?" "For not getting on that stagecoach. For staying when any sensible person would have run. For seeing something in me worth saving." "We saved each other," she corrected. "And we'll save this little one too, from whatever the world throws at him." Samuel made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like an observation. Already, Evelyn thought, he was making his voice heard. Already, he was claiming his place in the world. The following days brought a stream of visitors. Everyone in Silver Creek wanted to see the baby, to bring gifts, to be part of this symbol of the town's renewal. Robert Henderson brought an exquisite wooden rattle from Chicago. The railroad workers pooled money for a savings bond. Even the Mexican miners came down from their camp with a beautifully woven blanket. "This child," Mrs. Chen said, watching the procession of well-wishers, "belongs to the whole town. He is our future made flesh." It was a weighty thing to put on such tiny shoulders, but Evelyn understood. Samuel wasn't just their son. He was proof that life could flourish here, that families could grow, that Silver Creek had a future worth investing in. A week after Samuel's birth, Jonas returned to the forge, though he came home every few hours to check on them. Evelyn could hear his hammer ringing, a sound that had once seemed lonely but now sounded like building, creating, preparing. She was nursing Samuel one afternoon when Jonas came in carrying something wrapped in cloth. "I made something," he said, almost shyly. Inside the cloth was an iron butterfly, delicate as lace despite being made of metal. Its wings were spread as if about to take flight, and every detail was perfect. "It's beautiful," Evelyn breathed. "But why a butterfly?" "Because that's what you did to this town. To me. You helped us transform from something dying into something that could fly." He hung the butterfly in the window where it would catch the light. "Every time I see it, I'll remember that change is possible, that resurrection is real. Jonas Mercer, you're becoming a poet." "You're a bad influence on me, Mrs. Mercer." Samuel gurgled, drawing their attention. He was looking at the butterfly, his unfocused eyes drawn to the way light played off the metal. "See," Jonas said, "he appreciates art already. He appreciates shiny things, like a magpie." "Our little magpie," Jonas agreed, and the casual endearment made Evelyn's heart swell. That evening, as they sat on the porch with Samuel sleeping in Evelyn's arms, they watched Silver Creek settling into night. Lights glowed in windows that had been dark for years. Voices carried on the evening air, families at dinner, friends gathering, life being lived. "I've been thinking," Jonas said, "about expanding the forge, taking on apprentices. The railroads brought enough work for 3 blacksmiths." "That's wonderful. Who would you train?" "The Morrison boy, for one. Sam's got good hands and needs direction. Maybe one of the younger Mexican men. They've got mining experience that translates well to metalwork." "Building a legacy," Evelyn said softly. "Building a future. For him." Jonas touched Samuel's tiny fist. "I want him to grow up in a town where people have opportunities, where hard work means something." "He will. We'll make sure of it." A month passed, then 2. Samuel grew with startling speed, his gray eyes, so like his father's, beginning to focus and track movement. He smiled for the first time when Jonas was singing him a lullaby, an old Irish tune that Jonas claimed his mother had sung to him. The town continued to grow around them. Robert Henderson's hotel broke ground, employing dozens of local workers. A newspaper started publication. The Silver Creek Phoenix, a name that captured the town's resurrection. New businesses opened monthly, and there was talk of building a proper hospital. It was during a town council meeting in September that the news came. Evelyn was there with Samuel, as she often was. The baby had become something of a council mascot, and his presence seemed to keep tempers cool during heated discussions. A telegram arrived for Jonas, delivered by young Sam Morrison, who'd become the telegraph operator. Jonas read it, his face going pale. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "Prescott's dead. Killed trying to escape federal prison." He passed her the telegram. "But that's not the important part. Look at the second paragraph." She read, her eyes widening. Prescott's assets had been seized and liquidated. The money, nearly $50,000, was being returned to Silver Creek as restitution for his crimes. The council room erupted in discussion. $50,000 could transform the town completely. But how to use it? "A hospital," Dr. Patterson suggested immediately. "Better school facilities," Miss Winters countered. "Infrastructure," Sullivan, the hardware store owner, insisted. "Proper sewage, water systems, all of it," Evelyn said, standing carefully with Samuel in her arms. "We divide it 3 ways: health, education, and infrastructure. But we do it smart. We use the money to create things that will generate ongoing revenue. A hospital that serves the whole region, a school that can board students from outlying areas. Infrastructure that can support double our current population." "That's thinking ahead," Tom said admiringly. "That's what we need to do. Think ahead, plan for growth." She looked around the room. "Prescott tried to steal our future. Now his money will build it instead. There's justice in that." The vote was unanimous. Fall arrived with golden aspens and crisp air that made Samuel laugh when it tickled his face. Jonas had taken on 2 apprentices and was teaching them not just blacksmithing, but the pride of creation, the satisfaction of building something useful and lasting. Evelyn had returned to helping with the store's books, but also found herself increasingly involved in town planning. Her ability to see patterns, to balance competing needs, made her invaluable as Silver Creek navigated its transformation. One evening, as the first snow of winter began to fall, they received an unexpected visitor. A woman, young and tired-looking, stepped off the evening train clutching a familiar-looking letter. Evelyn met her at the depot. Samuel bundled against the cold in her arms. "You're here about the letters," Evelyn said. It wasn't a question. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. "They said, Marcus Henderson, marriage." "Marcus Henderson is dead," Evelyn said gently. The letters were a deception. But Silver Creek is real, and it's thriving, and there are opportunities here for someone willing to work. I have nothing, just like you had nothing. Then you have everything you need to start. Evelyn smiled, remembering her own arrival. "Come, Mrs. Henderson, Ida, she still has that spare room. Tomorrow, we'll find you work. The hotel's hiring, the school needs assistance, there are dozens of possibilities." As she led the woman, Mary, her name was Mary, through the snowy streets, Evelyn pointed out the changes. The new buildings, the busy shops, the children playing despite the cold. "But why?" Mary asked. "Why would you help me?" "I'm nobody to you." "Someone helped me once," Evelyn replied. "Several someones, actually. They gave me a chance when I had nothing but anger and 17 cents. Now it's my turn to pass that on." They reached Ida's house, warm light spilling from the windows. Through the glass, Evelyn could see Jonas inside, apparently helping Ida with some repair. He looked up, saw her, smiled that smile that still made her heart skip. "Besides," Evelyn added, "this town was built on second chances. On people who refuse to give up. You answered those letters because you were brave enough to want something better. That's not nothing. That's everything." Mary was crying now, but it looked like relief rather than sorrow. Ida opened the door, took one look at the situation, and ushered Mary inside with promises of hot food and a warm bed. Jonas came out, took Samuel from Evelyn's arms. "Another one?" "Another one. But the last, I think. The word's gotten out about the deception. But not about the opportunity." No, that story's just beginning. They walked home through the falling snow, Samuel asleep against Jonas's chest. The town around them was alive with evening activity. The saloon's music, the restaurant's clatter, the sound of families and futures being built. "Do you ever think about it?" Jonas asked. "What would have happened if the letters had been real? If Marcus Henderson had been alive and waiting?" "Sometimes," Evelyn admitted, "but not with regret. I would have married a stranger for security. Instead, I found you. I found this." She gestured to the town around them. "I found myself. And I found my way back to life," Jonas said. "Though I still say you're a dangerous woman, Evelyn Mercer. The most dangerous. I came to this town with nothing and somehow convinced everyone to fight an impossible battle. And won." "We won," she corrected. "All of us, together." They reached their house, warm and welcoming, with the butterfly in the window catching moonlight and the iron rose on the mantel where Evelyn placed it each night. Samuel stirred as they entered, making small sounds that weren't quite words but would be soon. This child would grow up in a different Silver Creek than the one Evelyn had found. A living town instead of a dying one, a place of hope instead of despair. He would know his father as a respected craftsman and lawman, not a broken recluse. He would know his mother as a builder and leader, not a discarded bride. He would know that sometimes the worst deceptions could lead to the greatest truths. That sometimes you had to fight for what mattered. That sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, you could help resurrect not just a town, but the very idea of community, of belonging, of home. As Evelyn prepared Samuel for bed while Jonas stoked the fire, she thought about Mary, probably lying in Ida's spare room right now, wondering what tomorrow would bring. She remembered that feeling, that mixture of fear and hope that came with starting over with nothing. But Mary wouldn't have to fight alone. She had a whole town ready to help her, a community forged in struggle and strengthened by success. She had the example of others who'd made it through. She had proof that redemption was possible. "She'll be all right," Jonas said, reading her thoughts as he often did these days. "Yes, she's got the same look you had when I first arrived, desperate but determined. The look that said you were trouble? The look that said I was exactly what this town needed." Jonas kissed her, careful not to disturb Samuel, who was already drifting toward sleep. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only 3 times. You're slipping." "I love you, Evelyn Mercer. I love our son. I love this life we've built." "Built and are still building," she corrected. "We're not done yet." The spring of 1891 brought changes that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Silver Creek had grown from 30 souls to nearly 500, and Main Street bustled with a commerce that made the old-timers shake their heads in wonder. Samuel was crawling now, exploring their home with a determination that reminded everyone of his mother, while his serious gray eyes were pure Jonas. It was on a particularly fine April morning that Mary, the young woman who'd arrived with false letters 6 months ago, came to Evelyn with news that would set the town talking for weeks. "I'm getting married," she announced, her face glowing with a happiness that transformed her from the desperate creature who'd stepped off that train into someone radiant. Evelyn looked up from where she was preventing Samuel from eating Jonas's engineering journals. "To whom?" "Sam Morrison. He's been courting me proper-like for 3 months now." Mary twisted her hands nervously. "I know it seems fast, but when you've already traveled across the country for a false promise, a real one feels like something you shouldn't wait on." "Sam's a good man," Evelyn said warmly. "His uncle would be proud to see him stepping up, taking responsibility for his life in this town." "That's the thing," Mary said, sitting down and accepting Samuel when he crawled over to investigate this new person. "Sam wants to run for mayor. The town's incorporating officially next month, and he thinks young blood is what Silver Creek needs." Evelyn considered this. Sam Morrison was 23, the same age she'd been when she arrived. He'd grown from a shy telegraph operator into someone who understood both the old-timers and the newcomers, bridging gaps with an ease that surprised everyone. "He'd have my vote," Evelyn said. "But he'll need more than that. He'll need Tom's support for the business community, Jonas's backing for law and order, Mrs. Chen's approval for the established families." "Would you talk to them?" "They listen to you." "They listen because I listened to them first." Evelyn retrieved Samuel before he could pull himself up on an unstable shelf. "But yes, I'll sound them out. A wedding and an election. Silver Creek's going to be busy." That evening, as Jonas worked on a commission for the new hospital, decorative ironwork that would make it the finest building in 3 counties, Evelyn broached the subject of Sam's mayoral ambitions. "He's young," Jonas said, not looking up from his sketches. "So was I when I faced down Prescott. So were you when you became a marshal." "That's different." "How?" Jonas set down his pencil, considering. "It's not, I suppose." "And Morrison's got a good head on his shoulders. He's been learning the telegraph, keeping the communication lines open with the territorial capital. That matters." "So you'd support him?" "I'd consider it, especially if it keeps Harold Brennan from running. Brennan was a recent arrival who'd made money in mining and thought that entitled him to make decisions for everyone else. But Sam needs a platform. Something more than just being young and eager." "What kind of platform?" "Law and order, for one. We need a proper sheriff's office, deputies, a jail that's more than just a locked room in my forge." Jonas's expression was thoughtful. "And schools. Not just Miss Winter's single classroom, but real education, maybe even a library." "You've been thinking about this." "Someone has to. Samuel's going to need proper schooling. All the children are." Evelyn smiled, loving the way Jonas had gone from protecting just their family to considering all of Silver Creek's children. "You should be mayor." "No." The response was immediate and firm. "I'm the marshal when needed. The blacksmith always. But I'm not a politician. Neither is Sam Morrison." "Exactly. Which might make him perfect for the job." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, they could see flames lighting up the night sky. The new hotel, Robert Henderson's project that was nearly complete, was on fire. Jonas grabbed his rifle and rushed out, Evelyn following with Samuel clutched against her chest. The entire town was mobilizing, forming bucket brigades, but the fire was already consuming the hotel's wooden frame with terrifying speed. "Everyone back," Jonas shouted, taking command naturally. "It's going to collapse." Robert Henderson stood in the street, still in his nightclothes, watching his investment burn. "Everything," he kept saying. "Everything's in there. The contracts, the furnishings, everything. Is anyone inside?" Jonas demanded. "No, thank God. The workers went home at sunset. Then it's just property." But even as Jonas said it, everyone understood what this meant. The hotel had been more than just a building. It had been a symbol of Silver Creek's resurrection, proof that outside investors believed in their future. The fire raged for 3 hours before finally burning itself out, leaving only smoking ruins and the acid smell of dreams turned to ash. As dawn broke, revealing the full extent of the destruction, Robert Henderson sat on a wooden crate, his head in his hands. "I'm ruined," he said. "Every penny I had was in that hotel. The investors will pull out. I'll have to—" He stopped, unable to finish. "You'll have to start over," Evelyn said, sitting beside him, Samuel sleeping in her arms despite the chaos of the night. "Like I did. Like Jonas did. Like this whole town did." "With what?" "I have nothing left. You have knowledge, experience, and you have a town that doesn't abandon its own. I'm not one of yours. I'm a Henderson. My family's name is Poison here." "Your cousin's name was Poison," Jonas corrected, joining them as the last of the smoke cleared. "You came here trying to make amends, to build something positive. That matters." Tom Garrett approached, soot-stained and exhausted. "Emergency town meeting," he announced. 1 hour. We need to decide what to do about this. The meeting was held in the church, the only building large enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. The debate was fierce. Some wanted to see it as a sign that Silver Creek wasn't meant to grow too fast. Others worried that the fire would scare away other investors. But it was Sam Morrison who stood up with a proposal that surprised everyone. "We rebuild it," he said simply. "Not Robert alone. All of us. We form a cooperative. Everyone invests what they can and we own it together. A hotel that belongs to Silver Creek, not to outsiders." "With what money?" Harold Brennan scoffed. "This town barely has 2 nickels to rub together." "With Prescott's money," Sam continued, "we allocated funds for infrastructure. What's a hotel but infrastructure for growth? It brings visitors, encourages trade, provides jobs. The money's already designated," Dr. Patterson protested. "Then we redesignate it. Or part of it." Sam looked around the room, his young face earnest. "This is our chance to show that Silver Creek doesn't just survive disasters. We grow stronger from them." The debate continued for 2 hours, but gradually, Sam's vision gained support. Mrs. Chen offered to invest her savings. The Hendricks brothers, who'd returned after Prescott's arrest, pledged lumber from their ranch. Even the Mexican miners offered their labor for fair wages. "I'll manage the construction," Jonas said finally. "Make sure it's built right. Fireproof this time. Brick and iron instead of wood." "I'll keep the books," Evelyn added. "Make sure every penny is accounted for, every investor protected." Robert Henderson looked around the room in amazement. "You do this? After my family's deception brought such trouble?" "Your family's deception brought Evelyn here," Ida Henderson said with her characteristic directness. "And she saved us all." "Sometimes God works in mysterious ways, boy. Question is, are you going to be part of this town's future or not?" Robert straightened his shoulders. "I'm in. Whatever you need, my knowledge, my connections, my labor, it's yours." The vote was called, and it passed overwhelmingly. Silver Creek would rebuild the hotel as a community project, a testament to their resilience and unity. As people filed out, making plans and pledging resources, Sam Morrison caught Evelyn's arm. "Thank you for supporting me in there. You supported yourself." "That was a politician's solution, Sam. Maybe you're more ready for this than you think." 2 weeks later, Sam Morrison and Mary were married in the same church where Evelyn and Jonas had exchanged vows. It was a simpler affair than some of the recent weddings. Mary had no family to invite, and Sam's only relative was buried in the cemetery. But the entire town turned out to celebrate. Mary wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had sewn, incorporating fabric from Tom's store that Evelyn had discovered in that first chaotic inventory. Sam wore his telegraph operator's suit, cleaned and pressed, with a new tie that Jonas had gifted him. They looked young and hopeful and slightly terrified, which Evelyn remembered feeling exactly right for a wedding. "Do you take this woman?" the minister began, and Evelyn found herself holding Jonas's hand tightly, remembering their own vows. Samuel, now walking unsteadily, toddled between them, clutching his father's leg for balance. After the ceremony, as the reception spilled into the street, Silver Creek's default venue for celebrations, Jonas and Evelyn stood watching the dancers. The hotel's foundation was already being laid, brick by brick, and the sound of construction had become the town's new heartbeat. "She looks happy," Jonas observed, watching Mary dance with her new husband. "She looks like she belongs," Evelyn corrected. "That's better than happy. That's home." "Is that how you feel? Like you belong?" Evelyn turned to look at him, this man who'd gone from stranger to husband, from broken to whole, or at least whole enough. "I feel like I helped build something worth belonging to." The summer brought elections and complications in equal measure. Sam Morrison ran for mayor on a platform of planned growth and community investment. Harold Brennan ran on promises of bringing in outside money and rapid expansion. The campaign grew heated, with accusations flying about Sam's youth and inexperience versus Brennan's carpetbagger opportunism. It was during a particularly contentious debate at the town hall that tragedy struck again. Mrs. Chen, moderating the discussion with her usual calm authority, suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed. Dr. Patterson rushed to her side, but even before he shook his head, everyone knew. Chen Wei-lin, who had delivered babies and wisdom in equal measure, who had hidden documents that helped save the town, who had bridged the gap between East and West in their small community, was gone. The debate was forgotten. The election seemed suddenly trivial. The town mourned as one, and for the first time the Chinese miners came down from their camp not as workers, but as fellow grievers. Mrs. Chen, it turned out, had been supporting several of their families, sending money home to China, teaching their children English in secret sessions. "She never said anything," Jonas murmured at the funeral, where Buddhist rites mixed with Christian hymns in a ceremony that would have scandalized proper society but felt exactly right for Silver Creek. "She never needed recognition," Evelyn replied, holding Samuel, who seemed to understand the solemnity of the occasion. "She just did what needed doing." The election took place 3 days later, subdued and serious. Sam Morrison won by a narrow margin, and his first act as mayor was to propose a memorial for Mrs. Chen, not just a statue, but a medical fund for those who couldn't afford Dr. Patterson's services. "She always said a town's health was measured by how it treated its weakest members," Sam said at his inauguration. "We're going to make sure no one in Silver Creek suffers for lack of care." The hotel rose through the summer, brick by brick, a testament to communal effort. Jonas supervised the construction with meticulous attention, incorporating innovations that would make it the most modern building between Denver and San Francisco. Evelyn managed the finances, creating a shareholding system that gave everyone a stake in its success. Young Mary Morrison proved surprisingly adept at organization, coordinating the women who sewed curtains and linens, planning the interior decoration with an eye for beauty that no one had suspected she possessed. "I used to dream about beautiful things," she explained when Evelyn complimented her taste. "When you have nothing, you become very good at imagining everything." It was in September, as the hotel neared completion, that a letter arrived which would change everything once again. It was addressed to Jonas, bearing the seal of the U.S. Marshal's Service. Jonas read it twice, his face grave, before handing it to Evelyn. They were offering him a position, chief marshal for the entire territory based in the capital. It was a tremendous honor, recognition of his work in bringing down Prescott and maintaining order in Silver Creek. "It's what you were before," Evelyn said carefully. "What you were meant to be." "I was meant to be a blacksmith in a dying town until you arrived," Jonas replied. I don't know what this is. It's an opportunity, a chance to help not just Silver Creek but the entire territory. It would mean leaving, moving to Cheyenne. Samuel would grow up in a city. Samuel would grow up with a father who made a difference on a larger scale. Jonas stood and paced to the window where his iron butterfly caught the evening light. Is that what you want? To leave everything we've built here? Evelyn joined him, Samuel on her hip, now sturdy and curious and beginning to form words that almost made sense. I want you to be who you're meant to be. If that's a territorial marshal, then we move. If that's a blacksmith in Silver Creek, then we stay. How can you be so calm about this? Because home isn't a place, Jonas. It's people. It's purpose. It's the life we build together, wherever that might be. Jonas was quiet for a long moment, then took Samuel from her arms, holding his son up to look him in the eye. What do you think, little man? Should your father be a marshal or a blacksmith? Samuel's response was to grab Jonas's nose and pronounce quite clearly, Papa. Both parents froze. It was his first real word, perfectly timed as if he understood the weight of the moment. Papa, Samuel said again, patting Jonas's face with chubby hands. Well, Jonas said, his voice rough with emotion, I suppose that settles it. But it didn't, not really. For the next week, Jonas wrestled with the decision. He consulted Tom, who said the town needed him. He talked to Sam Morrison, who said the territory needed him. He even visited Mrs. Chen's grave, standing in the small cemetery on the hill, asking for wisdom from someone who'd always seemed to have it. It was Ida Henderson who finally provided clarity, in her characteristic no-nonsense way. You're trying to choose between two good things, she said, finding Jonas at his forge one evening. That's a luxury most folk never get. But you're asking the wrong question. What's the right question? Not where you're needed most, but where you can do the most good. A blacksmith serves his town. A territorial marshal serves thousands. But a man who's been both, who understands both justice and creation, that man could shape the whole territory's future. And leave Silver Creek behind? Silver Creek doesn't need you to save it anymore. You and Evelyn already did that. Now it needs you to represent it, to make sure what happened here doesn't happen in other towns. Ida's weathered face softened slightly. Besides, it's not like Cheyenne is the moon. The railroad runs both ways. That night, Jonas discussed it with Evelyn again, this time with his mind clearer. If we go for 3 years, long enough to establish proper law throughout the territory, to set up systems that will outlast me. Then we come back. And the forge? Sam Morrison's brother wants to learn the trade. I could train him before we leave, and the forge would be waiting when we return. Evelyn studied his face, seeing the conflict but also the growing certainty. You want to go. I want to matter on a larger scale. I want to prevent other Prescotts from destroying other towns. I want Samuel to grow up seeing his father make a real difference. He paused. But only if you're with me completely. This has to be our decision, not mine. Then we go, Evelyn said simply. We take our iron rose and our butterfly and our son, and we go make a difference. And in 3 years we come home. The announcement of Jonas's acceptance and their impending departure sent shockwaves through Silver Creek. Some felt abandoned, others proud that one of their own would represent them at such a high level. The hotel's grand opening, scheduled for October, took on added significance as a farewell celebration. The opening exceeded everyone's expectations. The Silver Creek Community Hotel stood 3 stories tall, built of red brick with Jonas's ironwork adorning every window and doorway. The lobby featured a mural painted by a traveling artist who'd been so taken with the town's story that he'd worked for room and board just to be part of it. Robert Henderson, now the hotel's manager rather than owner, gave a speech about redemption and community that had half the crowd in tears. Sam Morrison, growing into his role as mayor, spoke about the future with a confidence that made people forget his youth. And Jonas, in his last act as the town's unofficial lawkeeper, presented his badge to young Sam Morrison's brother, deputizing him until a proper sheriff could be elected. "This town saved me," Jonas said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "When I was lost in grief, you gave me purpose. When I was alone, you gave me community. And when Evelyn arrived, you gave me the courage to love again. I'm not leaving Silver Creek. I'm carrying it with me, representing it, fighting for it, and towns like it throughout the territory. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Samuel, perched on Evelyn's shoulders, clapped his hands and shouted, "Papa!" which made everyone laugh through their tears. Their last month in Silver Creek passed in a blur of preparations and farewells. Jonas trained young Morrison in the forge, passing on not just techniques, but the philosophy of creation. Evelyn worked with Mary to transition the store's bookkeeping and helped establish a women's aid society that would support newcomers the way she'd been supported. The hardest farewell was to the house they'd made their home. Evelyn stood in each room, remembering the kitchen where Jonas had first kissed her, the bedroom where Samuel had been born, the parlor where they'd made countless plans for the town's future. "We'll be back," Jonas said, finding her touching the iron butterfly in the window. "I know, it's just, this is where we became us." "No," Jonas corrected, pulling her close. "We became us the moment you stood up to Prescott, the moment I offered to teach you to shoot, the moment we chose to fight together instead of apart. This house just witnessed it." On their last evening, the entire town gathered for a farewell dinner in the street. Tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes. The Mexican miners performed traditional dances. The railroad workers sang Irish ballads. Even Harold Brennan, who'd lost the election but gained respect for accepting it gracefully, gave a toast to the couple who taught us that courage comes in many forms. As the evening wound down, Robert Henderson approached with a wrapped package. "A going-away present," he said, "and an apology for my family's part in bringing you here under false pretenses." Inside was a daguerreotype of the entire town, taken that very day, with everyone arranged in front of the new hotel. In the center stood Jonas and Evelyn with Samuel, surrounded by all the lives they'd touched and changed. "So you don't forget us," Robert said. "As if we could," Evelyn replied, tears streaming down her face. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Half the town gathered at the depot to see them off, the other half claiming they had dust in their eyes and couldn't possibly come. Jonas lifted their trunks onto the train while Evelyn held Samuel, who seemed fascinated by the great iron engine. Tom Garrett pressed a ledger into Evelyn's hands. "The store's accounts. In case you get bored and want to check my math from afar." Sam Morrison shook Jonas's hand formally, then abandoned dignity to embrace him. "Thank you for believing I could be more than a telegraph operator." Mary Morrison kissed Evelyn's cheek. "Thank you for showing me that starting over with nothing doesn't mean ending with nothing." Even Ida Henderson had come, looking stern as always, but with suspiciously bright eyes. "You did good, girl. Both of you did good. Now go do good somewhere else, and then come home." As the train whistle blew its warning, Jonas helped Evelyn and Samuel aboard. They found seats by a window looking out at the gathered crowd. Silver Creek spread behind them, no longer a ghost town, but a living, thriving community with new buildings rising, children playing in the streets, and hope written in every face. "Ready?" Jonas asked, taking her hand. "Ready," Evelyn confirmed, though her throat was tight with emotion. The train lurched into motion, and Samuel laughed with delight at the movement. The crowd waved, some running alongside the train until it picked up too much speed. Evelyn waved back until Silver Creek disappeared around a bend, replaced by open prairie and infinite sky. "It's not goodbye," Jonas said softly. "No," Evelyn agreed, settling Samuel more comfortably on her lap. "It's just the next chapter." As the train carried them toward Cheyenne and their new life, Evelyn pulled out the daguerreotype Robert had given them. There they all were, Tom behind his counter, the Hendricks brothers in their best clothes, young Sam and Mary Morrison holding hands, Ida standing ramrod straight, the miners and railroad workers and all the others who'd made Silver Creek's resurrection possible. "Look, Samuel," she said, pointing to the image. "That's home. That's what we're fighting for now. Not just one town, but all the towns like it, all the people who deserve a chance to build something better." Samuel studied the picture with serious gray eyes, then pointed at the tiny figures of his parents and himself. "Home," he said clearly. "Yes," Jonas said, pulling them both close. "Wherever we are, whatever we do, that's home. And we'll go back to it. But first, we have work to do." The train rolled on through the morning, carrying them toward new challenges and responsibilities. Behind them, Silver Creek continued its daily life. The forge rang with young Morrison's hammer, the store opened for business, the hotel welcomed its first paying guests. The town they'd saved no longer needed saving. It needed representing, advocating, protecting from the kind of predation that had nearly killed it. And that's what Jonas would do as territorial marshal, with Evelyn beside him keeping the books balanced and the cause just, with Samuel growing up to understand that sometimes the hardest battles weren't fought with guns, but with persistence, courage, and an absolute refusal to give up. 3 years, they'd promised. 3 years to make a difference on a larger scale than home to Silver Creek. As the miles accumulated between them and the town, Evelyn fingered the iron rose still pinned to her dress, its weight a constant reminder of permanence in a world of change. "Tell me again why we're doing this," she said to Jonas, needing to hear it one more time. "Because we can. Because we must. Because Samuel deserves a father who didn't just save one town but helped save them all." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "And because you're still a dangerous woman, Evelyn Mercer, and the whole territory deserves to benefit from that danger." She laughed, startling Samuel, who then laughed too, the sound filling their compartment with joy. "Then God help the criminals and corrupt officials of Wyoming Territory. They have no idea what's coming." "No," Jonas agreed, "they really don't." As afternoon painted the prairie gold, Evelyn opened the ledger Tom had given her, unsurprised to find his math was indeed off in several places. She began making corrections, the familiar work soothing. Jonas dozed, exhausted from the emotions of departure. Samuel played with the wooden train Robert Henderson had carved for him, making whooshing sounds that might have been the wind or the engine or just the pure joy of movement. This wasn't the life Evelyn had imagined when she'd answered those fraudulent letters. It wasn't the bitter disappointment of arrival at a ghost town or even the triumph of resurrection they'd achieved. It was something more. A life of purpose that extended beyond personal happiness to communal responsibility. She thought of Mary, now helping to run the store, finding her own strength. Of Sam Morrison, young and eager, learning to lead. Of Robert Henderson, finding redemption in service rather than profit. Of all the lives that had intersected in Silver Creek, creating something greater than the sum of their parts. The train whistle sounded, long and lonely across the prairie, but Evelyn didn't hear loneliness in it anymore. She heard promise. She heard possibility. She heard the future calling, and she was ready to answer. "Next stop, Cheyenne," the conductor called. Jonas stirred, opened his eyes, met Evelyn's gaze. "No regrets?" "None." "You? How could I regret the path that brought me you?" They were the same words she'd spoken to him once, turned back now like a gift, like a promise. Like the circle of their iron rose, perfect, permanent, and unbreakable. The train carried them forward into the afternoon sun, toward new challenges and opportunities. But part of them would always remain in Silver Creek, in the town that had taught them that sometimes the greatest gifts came disguised as the cruelest deceptions, that sometimes you had to lose everything to find what really mattered, and that sometimes, if you were very brave and very lucky, you could help birth hope from the ashes of despair. In 3 years, they would return to find Silver Creek thriving beyond even their imagination, a proper town with schools and churches, businesses and laws, families growing and prospering. They would return as heroes, but more importantly, as neighbors, as friends, as family. But that was the future. For now, there was just the train rolling through the prairie, a family united in purpose, and the knowledge that they'd already done the impossible once. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with the strength forged in Silver Creek's fires and the love that had bloomed in its ashes. The iron rose caught the light through the train window, throwing tiny rainbows across the compartment. Samuel reached for them, laughing when they danced away from his grasp, not understanding yet that some things, light, hope, love, couldn't be caught but only experienced, only shared, only passed on from one heart to another, one generation to the next, one town to all the towns that would come after. And in that moment, on that train, with that child's laughter and that couple's clasped hands, and that iron rose throwing light into the world, the story that had begun with a lie transformed finally and completely into truth.